This regular meeting of the Board of Education for July 17th, 2018 is called to order. Welcome to everyone present and our television viewers. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on this evening has been posted as required by law. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times. This meeting is also being streamed live on our PPS TV services website. As a reminder, we now have our PPS Ombudsman, Judy Martin, attending all regular board meetings. Judy's straight in the back there. And specifically, Judy will be here to listen to public comments and, if appropriate, provide additional support to families who need or want it. Judy can be reached at 503-916-3045 or at ombudsman@pps.net. We also have interpreters with us this evening, or maybe not. Oh, yes. And I'd like to ask them to come forward at this time, introduce themselves in the languages they'll be interpreting, and inform the audience where they'll be located in the auditorium should anyone need their assistance. Please use the standing microphone. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good evening. Muy buenas tardes. Me llamo Daniel y voy a estar ofreciendo servicios de interpretación para las personas acá que hablan español. Estoy sentado acá en la esquina en esta parte para acá atrás. Muchas gracias.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Кристина, я русская переводчица. Если вы нуждаетесь в переводе, то вы можете найти меня вон там в углу.
Xin chào, tôi nói tiếng Việt. Nếu cần sự giúp đỡ về tiếng Việt, tôi ngồi ở phía sau đây. Xin cảm ơn.
你好，我叫杨波，我是讲国语的，会在那边，需要帮的话请找我，谢谢。
habeen wanaagsan magacayga aamino waa haddaad turjumaan soomaali u baahantiin xaggaad jooga.
Thank you. So tonight's the first board meeting of the new school calendar year. Here's an overview of our agenda this evening. We'll begin with recognizing a board scholarship award winner. We'll have a summary of the 2017-18 school year for the Board of Education, second readings of 2 policies, the public access to district records and the comprehensive sexuality education policy and plan. We'll hear a report from the superintendent, have student and parent comment, begin the discussion this evening on the Lincoln Master Plan, talk more about the 2017 bond. We'll vote on board leadership and we'll have our business agenda, and then we'll hear a summary of a prior complaint. With that, I'd like to ask Director Bailey to kick off the evening with the recognition of our PPS board scholarship winner.
Well, it's always interesting being a board member and learning new things. Like, I had no idea that there was a board scholarship that's given every year. And it's given to a graduating senior who has chosen education as their career field. Yay, yeah. And is going to attend a public college and blah, 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 blah. A couple of other requirements. But pleased tonight to, well, let me do a little bit of history first before announcing our winner. The scholarship was actually first put together in 1989, and then it was transferred to the Oregon Community Foundation to administer, and now it goes through the Oregon Student Assistance Commission, and the nominees come from high school counselors. So our winner is Samax Noor, and I hope that's close to what your name is. Come on up. She has just graduated from Madison High School. And she is going to attend Portland State University.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the scholarship. My name is actually pronounced Samaha Noor, but you were close. My name is actually spelled in Somali, so X is pronounced like an H. There's an X in my name. Yeah, I graduated from Madison High School. I'm a proud senator. Graduated as a junior, but I'm still going to be there all the time to support my school, always. I decided to major in education only because I feel like the best way to serve my community and the best way to give back and to change my community is through education. And there should be more people that look like me also that are teaching people that look like me. So again, I'm super blessed to have this scholarship. It's going to help me a lot, honestly. and hopefully it'll take me far, and my goals will be like, so, how do you say it? Accepted. There you go.
Yeah. Well, in 4 years.
Yeah.
c-
I mean, I'm hoping to go up to my doctorates to become a professor, but we'll see.
Whoa, awesome.
Talk to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Great, thanks. And so let's have a little photo opportunity here.
Congratulations again. It's just an overview of what happened last year. So, having just finished our last calendar year, it's a time to reflect on our work. As everyone knows, we began with a running start. There were 3 new board members joining 4 veterans. Midway through the year, the board leadership developed a work plan to knit together the work that was happening in all the committees and at the full board level. It's also helped us stay focused on the work we wanted and needed to accomplish. So people have, it's been posted online and then in people's packets. But just a summary of what happened last year, and I think this next year for the board's work, it's going to be really exciting. I think this year was a sort of foundational building year, and next year with a new superintendent, an experienced board, hopefully we'll be diving right into really the core of our mission. But just wanted to, before we left this last year, to just review some of the things that the board worked through and we spent the majority of our time in. So I'm going to just flip through really quick. We had 8 strategic imperatives. Clearly the most important thing for the board was our number one job, which was to hire a new superintendent. So that was really the first order of business from July 1, and 42 days later, we hired our superintendent, and we've been off and running ever since. So really having a key piece of the leadership of the district at the very beginning taken care of. At the board level, we look to make our meetings more accessible. We've added interpreters. We have legal counsel at the table. We've, I think, had 4 or 5 meetings this year in high schools so that we're out in the community, not just here in BESC, not that we don't like BESC, but it was good to get out, for us to get out into our high schools. In addition, at the same time that this board began its work, the voters had just approved a very substantial bond, and that built on the bond from 2012. So we started the school year by opening the 3 modernized or rebuilt schools, Roosevelt, Franklin, and Fabian. So those schools were on time and on budget. So a great way to start the year. And unfortunately, we had our new superintendent, although it was a little bit before he started, here for the start of school. Also, there was a year of pretty substantial health and safety improvements that were made. And I think next board meeting, we're going to have an overview of what those ones that were made. We also approved, this is the 2017 bond, the Kellogg Master Plan and the budget, and also the Madison Master Plan and budget. And we've got 2 more of those to do, so that'll be part of the 2018-19 board's work to review the master plan. And tonight we've got the Lincoln master plan on our agenda, and that'll be followed then by Benson. In addition, so I think Director Rosen's committee did a lot of the health and safety work. The Finance and Audit and Operations Committee and the full board did a lot of the bond work. Of course, the hiring of the superintendent was a full board project. And then, but shifting then to more equitable schools. So no sooner have we gotten school started, but also I guess it started in August. Director Bailey's committee did a lot of heavy lifting on looking at the boundaries and what we needed to do as a board in order to be able to open 2 new middle schools, and so that's Harriet Tubman and Roseway Heights. And we're looking forward to in a month seeing the fruit of that work. But that was a really heavy lift by again Director Bailey and the members of that the enrollment and forecasting committee. In addition, as part of the budget process, Superintendent Guerrero introduced a new equitable staffing model, which hopefully this year we'll see changes in staffing in a way that no matter what school you are in Portland, there'll be greater equity in terms of staffing. We also finished negotiations and ratified a number of agreements. Since we've been there, we've ratified 5 of the agreements. And that was, I want to thank Director Constam and Director Moore and the superintendent for participating in that the contract negotiations with PAT. And then in terms of student safety, in September we commissioned the Whitehurst and Scott investigation. That investigation took about 6 months, and we've had the report delivered to us, and I know staff is in the process of building an implementation plan, and that will be on next week's agenda as well, I think, to get an update on the implementation plan. In addition, around student safety, we had from Director Constam's committee a Title IX and sexual harassment policy adopted. Then the full board also made it a priority to diversify our legal representation this year, just so that we were balancing out who was handling the district's legal work in a way to both sort of leverage better costs from that, and also to be able to sort of tap into the expertise that exists across the city of Portland. In addition, we revamped the formal complaint policy. The law had changed, but also our practices had not caught up, so we updated that complaint policy that was recently adopted. Tonight, and actually this next number, the public records policy, there should be an asterisk at the end because we're actually considering it and voting on it tonight, but it's been a year-long, it's been the most worked policy ever, or at least in recent history. We also adopted a conflict of interest and nepotism policy, and as a full board have spent a fair amount of time working to resolve in a cost-effective way some outstanding legal cases and issues. Also, as part of the budget process, 2 new internal performance auditors were included. Then, in budget and finance, this was a heavy lift for the whole board. We had a change mid-year in the finance and the budget staff, and but I think the team put it together, got it across the line with, I think, 2 days to spare before the deadline. But I think what I would say would characterize that budget, and would thank the superintendent at really drilling down on how to align our resources against our student needs, and having an equitable staffing formula, but also looking at how do we provide greater student supports in a whole host of different ways. In addition, we had a really important legislative bill last year, House Bill 4117, and that was in Director Constam's committee. Huge, could have created a huge hole in our budget if we hadn't passed that, so it was critical to us being able to have I think a slightly more normal budget process than we would have had otherwise. And then finally, the last slide is just one of the things that we did this year is look at one of the key roles of the board is to we have a job is to hire the superintendent, but also and pass the budget, but we also have a policy-making role, so we're the legislative body. And so this year, we had a number of policies that were outdated, that needed to be updated, or new issues have arisen, and we needed to modernize our policies. So I think almost every committee, I'm looking at this list, just about every committee had some policies that they worked on, really to give a framework for the district on what's our values and what we wanted to do in terms of sort of setting the framework for district staff and how they run the district. So it was a full policy year, and again, I want to say to all my fellow board members that there was a lot of work that happened in committees and at the full board level, and it was a foundational year that hopefully will really set us up well for the next year. So that's the recap. On a personal note, I want to thank the board for giving me the opportunity to lead and serve this school year as the board chair. We started our time together with many challenges, no permanent superintendent, a new board, learning to work together, at the same time changing our culture and our practices. We had health and safety issues in our buildings, students without equitable middle grades experiences, and key policies were non-existent or out of date. But we started our time together, I think, with optimism, and even more optimism when the superintendent came, and a common desire to get PPS back on track and on its way to becoming the school district we want for our kids and our community. And I'm going to apologize for the occasional 6 to 7 hour meetings and any mistakes I made as a leader, as the chair. So I appreciate that all of my board members were good teammates. You were game for a hurry-up offense. I don't know if everybody knew they were signing up for that, but that's what we got. And for the willingness for each of you to help lead and advise. And there was plenty of that last one. All of you board members contributed to really the advances we made this year. And I also want to acknowledge that in many ways it was a hard year. We had to do a lot of things concurrently, and so we really had to push the pace, which made it, I think, a pretty exhausting year for all of us, but I think people have had a chance to take some time off this summer, and hopefully we're going to be ready to go. There's no way we could have moved the work that we did without the daily assistance and support from the board office staff, so Roseanne and Karen, thank you for everything, and for the partnership with the superintendent and all the other staff in the central office and the schools who really helped us move a pretty big agenda this last year and setting PPS up for success. I also want to thank Liz for keeping me within the guardrails here at the board table. Sometimes it's hard to do. And for the strategic advice and counsel you provided me and the board. Later this evening, we're going to vote on a new chair and a vice chair for the next 6 months. I look forward to supporting the ongoing work of the board and the new leaders and all of PPS so that we can make our schools the place that we want all our kids to be at. So thank you for a great year, and I'm looking forward to the next year as well. Go ahead.
I want to take this opportunity to thank you for putting the recap to just really understand the work that we've done in this year, and there was a lot of heavy lifting, and I think that can be attributed to your leadership, that we got a lot of work done. So I want to thank you for your leadership, because I feel like we are making a difference, and we are ready for this coming year feeling energized and that we have a direction. And it feels really good. So thank you for the hard work that you've put into this to really help us grow to here.
Thank you, Director Esparza Brown. Go ahead.
I wanted to say thank you to Julia. I know how hard you worked because I saw those late night email timestamps.
There were no 6 a.m. timestamps, just to be clear.
But I think we accomplished a lot this year, more in a year than we accomplished, or at least I feel like I accomplished in the previous 2 years, and that means a lot to me. And So it's a job well done. You work so hard, and I'm so appreciative. And I really like the recap. I mean, it was a really nice way to end the year, see what we've accomplished, and get ready for a new year. And you're right, the staff has been great, and I want to thank them too, but especially you for all your hard work. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Likewise, Julia called me up the day after the election, said, "Scott, we got work to do," and you set the pace, and thank you.
I'm going to pass the baton, but we're all going to be in this race together. So at this time, we're going to switch to the business agenda, and I'd like to announce that Resolution 5685 has been withdrawn from the business agenda and will be rescheduled. Board members, are there any items that you have questions on? And this does not include those individual action items that are listed on tonight's agenda. So is there anything that people are going to have questions on for staff? Otherwise, staff will be free to leave.
I do have some questions on the Harangue Long contract, but that's General Counsel Large, so you have to stay here anyway.
Anybody else? Okay. So next we're going to have the second reading that Director Esparza Brown is going to lead this part of the discussion. It's our final review and approval vote on this policy.
Great. As reported last time, the Teaching and Learning Committee considered the policy on comprehensive sexuality education plan at our June 11th board meeting. And at that time, we voted unanimously as a committee, can't say it tonight, to move this forward. It has been posted for 21 days, and within that time, we have had 2 comments on this that the board has considered, and we think that's reflected in the policy. So we're ready to vote on this new policy, which has really made its way through a lot of vetting, basically, with lots of stakeholder groups. I think that the committee did an amazing amount of work at reaching out to students who then developed a student Bill of Rights around the topic, and various stakeholder groups to really come up with this comprehensive plan that is then aligned to our state standards here. I think one of the most exciting parts of this is that the options for parents to opt out of components of the modules within the whole policy, so that they're making individual decisions that certainly align with the parents' families and beliefs, while still allowing for some other important information for the children to have access to. So I think that that's a very important piece of work within this policy. So therefore, the committee Teaching and Learning was highly impressed with how this was developed in the final product. So therefore, we would like to then, again, conclude that we have voted unanimously for it and feel that it is really comprehensive work.
Thank you for the summary, Director Esparza Brown. So it's coming to us from the Teaching and Learning Committee with a unanimous recommendation. Board members, let's see, why don't I first get a motion to move this?
So moved.
It's been moved by Director Anthony and seconded by Director Esparza Brown. Ms. Hewson, is there any public comment on Resolution 5683?
Yes, we have one, and that is Karina Alcantara.
Hello, PPS board members. Thank you for providing me the space to speak tonight. My name is Karina Alcantara, and I attend Benson Polytechnic High School. Today, I am here because I care about students that are being abused by their partners or by a family member. I am here for the students that are having mental health issues and are considering suicide because there is no access to receiving proper support. I am here for the LGBTQ+ students that are excluded when learning about how to have safer sex. I am here for myself because I want to feel like I am valued in our community at school. Today, I thank you for passing the comprehensive sexuality education plan for all students at PPS schools. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. Is there any board discussion? If not, we'll now vote on Resolution 5683, the Comprehensive Sexuality Education Policy. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? Resolution 5683 is approved by 7-0 vote. Thank you, and thank you for coming to testify tonight. So thank you again to the Teaching and Learning Committee for moving that. So next on our agenda, we have the public access to district records policy. So this is, I think, got to be the longest policy project. We had this last year and quite a long time. So when the 2017-18 board began our work in July of 2017, one of the top policy priorities was to revise the public records policy in an effort to make the school district's work more accessible to the public, both the community and the media, and to comply with recent changes in state law, increase accountability and transparency, and build trust with the broader community. It was a comprehensive overhaul. The new policy is anchored in the revisions to the state law contained in Senate Bill 481, which mandates statutory timelines for public records responses and is focused on enhancing the public's access to public records. The prior policy was, we essentially have scrapped it. This isn't really a red line. This is a sort of full policy replacement. The prior policy was short, pretty vague, deferred policy decisions to the administrative directive, and created some ambiguity related to some pretty fundamental policy questions related to our records. The revised policy is a result of many meetings of the board's Policy and Governance Committee and was created with the input of community members, members of the media, staff, the Society of Professional Journalists, our Public Records Office, Ryan Vanderway, and the General Counsel's Office. So highlights of the new policy include a statement that in order to promote transparency and provide an accurate accounting of how the district carries out the public's business, it's the intent of the board that district records should be disclosed courteously and consistent with state law. The goal is to provide records at no or minimal cost when the records are not lengthy and do not require significant time to locate. In terms of sensitive and confidential information about students, staff, and families, will follow state and federal law. When there's, and this is a key provision, when there's instances where information may be considered exempt, the district shall construe the public interest liberally in favor of disclosure. The public records officer, with advice and counsel of the general counsel, will make determinations as to whether a record is responsive, exempt from disclosure, or contain information the district is prohibited from disclosing. The public records officer is given the responsibility of the day-to-day administration of the district's records. So the values of timely responses, transparency of work, and minimizing cost to the public are included in the policy's guiding principles, and I know Mr. Vanderway adheres to those. An additional appeal has been built into this policy, and it's an appeal to the school board that if a requester believes a record has been inappropriately withheld, they can appeal to the board. That's not required by law. Requesters still retain the statutory right to request a review from the Multnomah County DA, but the school board appeal provides just an additional opportunity that may be more accessible to parents in the community. There's also a prohibition on retaliation against individuals who make public records requests and consequences for those who retaliate. To avoid conflicts of interest, no employee shall make the final decision on the application of exemptions if they're named in the request. They may assist in providing the records, but not in the decision-making regarding whether to utilize the exemption. So that's the high level of the policy. And following that, the superintendent and staff will have create an administrative directive that provides more sort of detailed advice that essentially implements the policy. So one of the things that might be asked, or sort of an obvious question, is if it was a priority, what took so long? So I thought I'd just walk through that because I think there's been a lot of questions about how long the policy has taken, and then, you know, have we been implementing it? Are we waiting to implement it till we vote on it, or is it actually underway? So just to go back to last summer, we had staff had already been working on drafting a revised policy and updating practices. So not only looking at the policy, but also what are those practices that we need to start doing already. So those internal practices were updated in advance of legal changes to really ensure a very smooth transition. In August, the Finance and Operations Committee had the first hearing, and then shifted over to the Policy and Governance Task Force. And at the August 29th board meeting, initial draft of the policy was shared. On September 1st, we took a lot of public comment that was submitted, especially from the Society of Professional Journalists, and also from just individual community members. So I would say that was almost a complete rewrite based on feedback from the community on how to make it better. On September 26th, we had a first reading of the public records policy before the full board. And at that time, we were in mediation with the Portland Association of Teachers, and the work on the policy was suspended until contract ratification was completed. And then so most of the fall went by. We had the contract ratification, and then on January 5th, the Policy and Governance Committee meeting met again to consider the policy. We had a second first reading at the February 27th board meeting to incorporate additional changes, and then we sent out that first reading of the policy to our unions as part of the 21-day public comment process. The Portland Association Teachers then requested to bargain items in the policy pursuant to Oregon's collective bargaining law, which obligated the district to begin to bargain with PAT for 90 days. We had additional policy and governance, so Director Rosen and Director Moore, remember we had many additional policy meetings on March 22nd, April 16th, May 16th to consider the policy and the updates. In the course of bargaining with PAT, the Portland Association Teachers, they proposed some changes which we agreed to incorporate in the policy and that were introduced in the committee meeting on May 16th. Those two amendments were then introduced at the June 12th board meeting, and we should have them before us today. The two amendments are pretty straightforward. One, in Section 8, we've added a sentence to maintain confidentiality for records throughout the records appeal process. It's always been our practice, so we felt that was something that we could put in our policy. And then second, in Section 3, relating to sensitive records, we added that upon receiving a public records request seeking potentially sensitive, personal, or private information related to staff member, the district shall notify the staff member and the staff members union, if represented in writing, of the existence and nature of the records request. And this was something else too that the board felt that we could add. We felt it wouldn't cause undue delay, and that it was our practice already to notify current employees. So those were two amendments that were put on the table, and as per our requirements, they've been open for public comment for 21 days. So tonight we'll consider both the amendments that came from the Policy and Governance Committee in addition to the underlying policy. And I'm trying to think, are there anything that the committee members, Director Rosen or Director Moore, that you want to add? This has been a well-worked policy.
It's been a journey, as they say. I'm very pleased to say that I prevailed on the Oxford comma debate.
The big wins.
Add the comma or no?
Pro. I'm very pro. Yes. Okay. It was, I think the comments that we got from various people who had experience using both our previous policy and process and more general experience, I think it substantially improved the policy. And I am hopeful that I think most of the changes are already in practice. I think we're already compliant with the new policy even before it's been passed. And I'm hopeful that this is going to produce a greater sense of transparency for the district, and will be well received by the public.
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to thank everyone for the input. We did get a lot of input. It had a significant impact on the way the policy was finally written, and it's a lot better for it. And I also appreciate that we're already practicing the policy in spirit.
Director Constantine, you have a question?
So we did get comments today from the Society of Professional Journalists about this second proposed amendment, which, as Director Brim Edwards mentioned, was something that the language was worked through very specifically with PAT. But the crux of the matter is that the amendment now reads, upon receiving a public records request seeking potentially sensitive personal or private information related to staff member, the district shall notify the staff member and the staff members union, et cetera. So the concern was that it could be construed that this obligation for notification could create a delay, and their recommendation was to either leave that out entirely or to modify it so that it reads, the district shall seek to notify the staff member, so that if you make the attempt, it satisfies the legal requirement and doesn't delay. It just seems like we should note their concerns and see whether or not there is a drive or a willingness to make those modifications. I personally think that the administrative directive can make it clear that the notification process does not override the earlier language that calls for no undue delay, and that records are released as quickly as practicable. But I did want to acknowledge their concerns and make sure that we are really tight about that in the language of the administrative directive.
So thank you, Director Constantine, for raising that. I was going to mention the great thing about this process is, like, to the very end, people have been commenting. So we received yesterday another sort of a flurry of some questions and comments, and then today also we received the additional comments. And so I'd like to address a couple of the issues that were raised. One of the issues that was raised by a public commenter is that a concern that this that the requesters be made aware they can immediately appeal the denial of the public records to the Multnomah County District Attorney via email versus going to the school board through the school board appeal process. And the point was, the school board appeal process, we have 30 days, and that really, if you went straight to the Multnomah County DA's office, you could get an answer much quicker. And we actually had a fairly lengthy conversation about this or discussion about it in the committee. And we decided that we wanted to keep the option for an appeal available to families, because there was a feeling that, like, not everybody, while some people might want to go straight to the DA's office and get an immediate answer, that that wasn't the route that all families would feel comfortable doing, and that they could look at this other venue, which would be going straight to the school board versus going to the DA. So we did consider that and decided that we didn't feel that we felt that both paths should be open. They have a statutory right to go to the DA, but that we'd offer this other option as well. And then, just the terms of the 30 days, generally our board meetings are 14 to 21 days apart, so it just was a logical way. If somebody filed appeal, we'd need probably a given point in time to be able to, or a window in order to be able to consider it within 30 days. So we did consider that. We have said that we'll ask the superintendent to consider whether to make it clear in the administrative director or some directive or some of the communication that people always have that right to go straight there. So it's not really you have to go to the school board and then the DA, that people, we just be clear that they can go there. Then there was a question about, another question about the records requests that was similar to the Society of Journalists, and I'll address that in a moment. But then there was a question about shouldn't the policy include the new public records laws and some of the time elements in that. And our response to that is we did have a discussion, quite a lot of discussion, because this is one of the issues we were trying to get after. But generally, policies don't include the actual statutory language, and we actually got conflicting comments on this particular point. Some people said put it in, other people said don't put it in. We did not put it in. It's duplicative, and our expectation is that staff will comply with the statutory deadlines. It doesn't need to be in the policy. So then the last question that came up that Director Konstam raised, I had an opportunity this afternoon to both consult with the district's public records officer and with the general counsel. And the response, so the concern was that if we have this notification of our employees that there'll be a delay. And the response I received back is that notifying employees when there's a potentially sensitive personal or private information will not delay the public records process. It memorializes a practice the district already engages in and simply adds a CC to the, or copy to the union if an employee is represented. So I think our staff appreciate the timely processing of records and not think this undermines the policy objective or statutory requirement. So it's probably worth monitoring to see if it actually potentially creates an issue, but at this point in time, our staff feel confident that that won't create any delay in the public records process. So that's kind of that's a summary of the comments we received. Again, we received lots of the process. We incorporated, this really is a sort of a community-built public records policy, but those are the ones we received in the last couple of days. Any other discussion or questions from board members? So I guess I want to just, as we sort of wrap it up, that I want to, every year PPS gets many public records requests, seeking thousands of documents each year. And with 50,000 students, the media, their families, parents who are interested in our school operations, that's expected. And public transparency has many positive values. Citizens who access public records will have an opportunity to better understand how decisions are made. They have an ability to see what information is actually available to staff and the board, and they can hold PPS employees and board members accountable for actions and decision making. So there's really a valuable role of having our work be transparent and public to the broader community. Timely access to public records and how exemptions were used has been a festering issue for PPS for many years in the past. And I think in the past 2 years we've seen a really significant shift. We have a designated public records officer who has already begun, as has been noted, has been implementing many of the changes. There's timely acknowledgement and responses to requests. And I'm sure our community and the media are going to be vigilant that we follow the policy and the administrative directive and the new state law, and that the result is our work is more open, transparent, and accessible. So thank you to all the staff who worked on this and for the work ahead, because I'm sure that the public records request will continue. So with that, if somebody has a would like to move, we're going to move this in a couple, it's sequenced. So we're first going to consider resolution 5682, the resolution to adopt 2.50.010, the public access to district records policy. Do I have a motion? Second. It's been moved by Director Bailey and seconded by Director Anthony. We also have two amendments to Resolution 5682. Do I have a motion to adopt those amendments?
So moved.
It's been moved by Director Constam and seconded by Director Anthony. Ms. Houston, is there any public comment to 5682 or the amendments?
Yes, we have two. We have Malcolm Ricks and Nick Budnick.
A super user.
Let's see. Hello, everybody. I am Malcolm Ricks. I'm with Safe Transportation. We are one of your vendors. We transport autistic children, special needs students. Is Ryan here? Vanderhee? You're doing a great job if you are. Thank you.
Agreed.
We've been working with Ryan to get copies of documents, approval letters, that the Oregon Department of Education understands that the district that we get our drivers certified for are the owners of these records. And putting this amendment through, or this policy through, it's going to make it easier for us to do business with other districts. The Oregon Department of Education is the one that checks the backgrounds for all of the drivers, both your drivers here and our drivers as vendors. Other districts may have been lax in their process of double-checking this information, but guess what? It is now a sticking point with many other districts, and they want copies of that. What should be a simple phone call to our contacts in the Transportation Department has somewhat turned into a difficult minefield. This policy will make it quick, will make it simple. It'll allow a specialized student transportation service to not only work for you, but work for Reynolds and David Douglas and whomever else we have contracts with. So I'm hoping that you push this through. I hope it gets signed today. I hope we get those documents soon. And I don't know if you need to address language for contractors, but if it is in there, Safe Transportation does waive the right to notify us because we are the requester of the information. That's it.
Thank you for your testimony. A new angle.
Okay to speak? Thank you. Thank you for having us tonight. My name is Nick Budnick. I'm a board member of the Society of Professional Journalists, Oregon Territory Chapter. I appreciate the board's discussion of our comments that were submitted earlier today, as well as the two previous rounds of testimony that we submitted. We at SPJ appreciated the board's careful consideration of this policy and its willingness to change the draft policy to reflect Oregon law's intent and letter. So thank you for that. We did want to follow up on the comments made here today. Appreciated the discussion of the intent that this not lead to delays, or at least the expectation expressed by Ryan that this would not lead to delays. We would appreciate it if you could put on the record the intent that this provision not lead to delays, because any delay that stems from this provision is by definition an unlawful, undue delay, because this policy that you're implementing, good intentioned, and we have no problem with this as a matter of practice. By making this a matter of policy with its current mandatory wording, we believe you're adding a new obligation that will add to delays in some cases. And because it's an optional discretionary action by your board, we believe that it will violate the Oregon legislature's intent in passing SB 481, the law that you referenced earlier. We were deeply involved in the discussion of SB 481 and the Attorney General's Public Records Reform Task Force and other aspects of this, and we are a little concerned to hear discussion of statutory deadlines because it implies that you have a certain amount of time to comply with the request, but the call is for producing the records promptly without undue delay as soon as it's practicable, and optional layers of notification, if made mandatory, threaten to add to the delays. So again, we support your efforts to notify employees and the union. We have no problem with that. We think that making it a matter of policy with the current mandatory language, which, as you pointed out, was worked through with the PAT prior to this hearing, we would appreciate it if you would, as a matter of the public interest, put this on hold, perhaps bring it up with the union, see if they are okay with you guys considering alternate language for this provision. Failing that, perhaps you could put on the record the intention that this not add to any delay of the records produced. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. At this point in time, we have both the policy and the amendments on the table, so I think we're planning to move ahead. But I think that I probably already stated the intent is not to delay. It's already our current practice, and the one thing about having something like this in policy versus in a contract is that our policy, there's a process if we, in a number of areas, find that we need to change the policy, we can go through the policymaking change of process, and I guarantee you it won't take a year next time. But we do have the flexibility, so our intent, there is no intent to add any delay. It's our current practice. And we know that you'll let us know if we need to improve our practices or you feel that a policy change is needed. And any citizen can bring a policy change to the board.
Thank you very much, and our thanks to Malcolm for showing the value of public records law in action. Have a good night.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you've hung with us for the year of all those meetings. Is there any further board discussion on the amendment to Resolution 5682? The amendments, sorry. The board will now vote on the amendments to Resolution 5682. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? The amendment to Resolution 5682 is approved by a 7-0 vote. Is there any board discussion of Resolution 5682? Nope. The board will now vote on Resolution 5682 as amended. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? Resolution, if not, Resolution 5682 as amended is approved by a 7-0 vote. All right, phew. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us this last year on that policy. And, okay. This is, okay. Superintendent Guerrero.
Do we want to?
I'd like to let the superintendent go ahead, and it's be less than 10 minutes, or? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Buenas tardes. We had a little bit of an absence there with a few weeks without a board meeting, so good to be back. I also want to start by extending just a congratulations to the board as a whole for a lot of accomplishments, and to Chair Brim Edwards and our leadership team. I think that was a pretty impressive list of work, and I fully expect that we'll continue on that kind of a trend. So congrats to the whole board for that admirable body of work. So we too continue to be busy as a staff and leadership. We're quite busy this summer. One of the key tasks that a superintendent has is to prioritize the building of a talented leadership team. Finding the right mix of talent is also a wonderful opportunity to identify an amazing team of skilled and deeply experienced leaders who in this case are committed to coming to Portland Public Schools and being a part of our transformational efforts. So we're continuing to make some key introductions and leadership announcements. And I'm going to ask our CAO and our Chief of Staff to come up and share with just a couple of introductions. But I think it's good to pause and just note that in the space of just 9 months, we have hired new leadership for almost every single department in the central administration here at PPS. I think this is a noteworthy feat, and I want to make sure that I give proper recognition to all the teams who have participated in a lot of vetting, screening, and interview process that's happened in recruiting candidates to join our efforts here, in particular the human resources team members who've really turned on the afterburners to get us to this point. I think in my last report to the board, I noted that we had hired Claire Hertz away from the Beaverton School District just over the hill to be our new Deputy Superintendent for Business Operations. And she is now on the job officially and here tonight. If I could ask her to stand. Oh, she's standing. She's got her trusty PPS badge on already. She has definitely hit the ground running on her second day already, so welcome aboard, Claire. And if I could ask our Chief of Staff to come up to the desk here, and our CAO as well. They also have a few key appointments I'd love for them to share with our board.
Good evening. I just wanted to share with you that we have an interim director of security. We are very fortunate to have Brian Martinek, who joined our team on a 3-month stint as a contractor, serving as our interim director of security. Filling George Weatheroy's shoes is a big task, and we wanted to take some time to really develop the position and the recruitment process, and also look at our security systems across the district. So Brian comes to us, he's taken a leave of absence. He was the former chief of police for the city of Vancouver. He served also for Portland Police Bureau and Multnomah County Sheriff. So he's on board with us through September 30th.
Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to introduce you to 3 great people. Well, 2 of 3. I don't think one of them is here. But the first person you all know, Dr. Sarah Davis, who previously served as assistant director in the ICA department working in science and mathematics. And now she is the senior director for our STEAM initiative. So we have expanded and integrated a lot of that work to take advantage not only of her knowledge and skill set, but the vision moving forward in the work that the superintendent has charged us with. So I'm excited to have her on board. She brings more than 20 years of experience in doing STEAM work with students. She's been an educator, she's been a researcher, both domestically and abroad, and she's worked in the tech world as well. So she brings a lot of that to the work. So welcome, Sarah. Our other new member of the team we stole from the great state of Texas via San Antonio and Houston. Her name is Dr. Aurora Terry, and she's been a classroom teacher, a site administrator. She has spent a great deal of time leading CTE work in Houston and has also led IB and AVID work. So we are really excited to have her because that aligns really well with the work that we're doing in college and career. So we're excited to have her, Aurora Terry. And our third new member we stole from just down the road in Forest Grove. She is our new director for elementary humanities. She will be leading the language arts, social studies, and ethnic studies effort at the elementary level. She too has been a classroom teacher and administrator. Her specialization is literacy, and that aligns really, really well with the need that we have right now. So is Gretchen here? No? Okay, next time. So with that, there are several more hires that we still need to make over the next month or so. So I will be returning to introduce you to some really great folks. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Valentino and Chief Soden. Chief of Student Support Services, Brenda Martinick, isn't able to be here this evening, but she also has been busy and made a few critical hires. Among them, Mary Mertz. She served as special education director here at PPS about 10 years ago. She'll be serving, newly appointed, as our senior director for special education with us. James Loveland, he's been with us in various capacities for about 13 years as a school psychologist. He'll be joining the central team as our new director of student success and health. And another Forest Grove transplant, Miss Chandra Cooper, will be heading our newly formed Department of Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. This coming Monday, our new chief of schools begins his first official day here in the Portland schools. That's Mr. Craig Cuellar, who has served as community superintendent for Baltimore County Public Schools. So I look forward to introducing him next week. We're still filling just a handful of remaining key positions, but our senior cabinet level team has been filled out at this point. So speaking of new faces, that happens to be the name of an event that I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I'm going to be joined by New York Schools Chancellor Richard Carranza, with whom I had the pleasure of serving for many years in San Francisco, who now leads the nation's largest school district, New York City, and a new superintendent to the area, Dr. Dana Diaz, a colleague, who started her first day in the Reynolds School District just yesterday. We're going to be getting together for a conversation about public education hosted at Franklin High School, and we'll be having a little bit of a panel conversation about our attempts as we've entered new contexts, small, medium, and large, and the challenges of narrowing achievement and opportunity gaps. So this is an event sponsored by the United Way, and we're looking forward to taking questions from an audience of educators and community leaders. And I think the event is sold out, but it will be live streamed if you want to tune in. Speaking of talks, earlier today I had the opportunity to speak to numerous Nike employees on a similar topic around public schools and our work here in Portland. The event was sponsored by Latino and Friends Network at Nike, moderated by Jorge Casimiro, president of the Nike Foundation. I want to thank him and the folks who took the time to engage in this conversation, many of whom are PPS parents. Thank you for your time and the invitation. We're also getting some national attention for our early kindergarten transition program, which helps students adjust before they start their education journey. A crew from PBS NewsHour and Education Week will be taking video and doing interviews next week at our very own Harrison Park School. This has been a very successful program, and it's great to see it getting this kind of attention. And then lastly, this is a plug for Project Community Care Day. I want to make sure folks save the date if they can on Saturday, August 18th from 9 a.m. till noon. We hope to see a lot of volunteers. Pick a school, your neighborhood school, any school. Grab a rake, grab some gloves, report to a school in your zone, and help us get ready for welcoming our students on the first day of school. To give you a sense of this important volunteer event and for a little bit of inspiration, I understand we have a quick little video just to give you a sense of how that went last year.
I clean up.
Why are you cleaning up?
For the first day of school. We're doing garden work to make sure all the garden's good. Chief Joseph when we're cleaning up.
It's been about 6 years that Cleveland High School's participated in Community Care Day.
And I get to meet some of our new students here and build relationships.
Well, I met the kindergartners. I'm thinking, I'm glad I go to this school.
What would you like to do, my friend?
I don't know, we just need something to brighten up the school pretty much.
It really sets the tone for kids, even though they don't notice plants and grounds when they walk in. But it sets the tone. They know a nice place when they see it.
But I know we want to make it super clean because if the school will get clean, And when we come into school, we look all fresh and new. When I hear Queenie, it makes me feel happy. Thank you, everyone, for helping out.
Perfect. Happy birthday.
Thank you in advance to all of our volunteers from the broader community who help our schools be ready. We hope folks mark their calendar for Saturday, August 18th in the morning. That concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. So next, we have on our agenda public comment. And we usually start with students, but I don't think we have any students this evening. So before we begin our public comment period, I want to review our guidelines. We appreciate the public coming and the community coming to attend our meeting and provide feedback to the board. We value public input as it informs our work, and we look forward to hearing everybody's thoughts. Board members and the superintendent do not respond to comments or questions during public comment, but the board office will follow up on board-related issues raised during public testimony. So guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration for others. Complaints about individual employees should be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. If you have any additional materials or items you'd like to provide the board or the superintendent, we ask that you give them to Ms. Hewson to distribute to the board and the superintendent. So presenters have a total of 3 minutes to share your comments. You begin by stating your name and spelling your last name for the record. During the first 2 minutes of your testimony, a green light will be on. When you have 1 minute remaining, a yellow light will go on, and when your time's up, the red light will go on. And at that point, we ask for you to just finish your sentence at that time and wrap up. So we appreciate people being here tonight. Ms. Hewson, do you want to start by calling the first two presenters?
Sure. We have Beth Blumklotz and Jimmy Applehands.
I am Beth Blumklotz, Special Education School Bus Driver for Portland Public Schools. I'm generally a laid-back, positive person who values diversity of thought. I'm wondering, however, about if you do. It seems as though you don't understand the value your school bus drivers, paras, custodians, and others bring as is shown through rates of pay for their work. To add to that, a couple hours ago, I was notified that School Board Chair Julia Brim Edwards wants to allow a person to share public comment once every 3 months. This feels retaliatory, an attempt to control the message that the board hears, which is a huge concern. We only get 3 minutes anyways, so now you're saying that you want to hear from us 180 seconds every 90 days? And that's if we get on the list of 6 speakers. Where's the transparency? As board members, you were not voted in to pick and choose what you want to hear and or who you want to hear from. In a letter of apology to Pioneer teachers, staff, parents, and community, you acknowledge that the Pioneer community know the strengths and potential inherent in Pioneer students, that you believe that the Pioneer community can help you understand how to better support their work to positively impact student outcomes. Well, your PPS special education school bus drivers are a very important part of the Pioneer community. We have daily direct one-on-one contact with each of those students. We make a difference every day in them having the best day possible. When Carol Smith left her role as superintendent, she was earning $247,000 in base salary after the PPS board voted in 2014 to give her a 28% raise. That doesn't include the cost of her benefits package, which included a $30,000 annuity, health insurance, and retirement contributions. When Superintendent Guerrero was hired to lead the district, the board increased the superintendent's salary to $295,000, a 19% increase. That's a $48,000 raise, well more than what a Portland Public Schools special education school bus driver makes in a year, and pretty darn close to the region's median income of $56,980. That salary doesn't include non-monetary compensation like retirement or health benefits. It's reasonable to assume that Superintendent Guerrero is making over $325,000 in total compensation based on Carol Smith's compensation package. You say you want to work with everyone to rebuild relationships. This doesn't seem to include your school bus drivers. While in negotiations, those of us who do have health benefits, we are told we should be thankful. We're told that those who transport landscaping and warehouse equipment and hamburgers, hot dogs, and chicken nuggets are paid more because of their job description, that they move stuff with pallet jacks. The way we've been treated during this negotiation is the same as Pioneer parents. The parents and their children deserve better. The continuation of disrespect that has been shown to the Pioneer community is unconscionable. School bus drivers are here not to get rich, but to earn a livable wage while serving the most vulnerable community whom we love. None of us grew up saying that we wanted to be school bus drivers when we grow up, yet here we are, proudly. Nickel and diming in negotiations only continues to send the message that you don't see our students' value. Last sentence. Your special education school bus drivers deserve better wages. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, James Applehands, Appelhanz. I would like to thank the school board for giving me the time to speak tonight on behalf of Portland Public Schools bus drivers and Amalgamated Transit Union Local 757. For a year, we have been negotiating in good faith towards a contract and have demonstrated a continued willingness to meet your negotiation team halfway. In response to this, the district has, through their indifference or incompetence, failed to meet the union's reasonable demands for an equitable contract. The lack of respect being shown to your employees is galling, and our patience has long since worn thin. Our demands are in no way radical. As shown in a recent report from the National Low Income Housing Coalition, a Portlander needs to make $23.88 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental. Our current wages are far lower than that. So as special needs bus drivers, an increasing number of us cannot afford to live in the communities that we serve. We deserve a living wage now. Already, we are losing staff due to your inaction. Some bus drivers, including myself, have received offers in the mail advertising sign-on bonuses for other transportation employers. And we are hearing more and more about bonuses and higher wages that our former coworkers are now getting after leaving PPS. For example, David Douglas School District is offering a $1,500 sign-on bonus, and local First Student Yards are offering a $2,500 sign-on bonus. The Vancouver School District has a current posting starting at $19.47 an hour, which is significantly higher than PPS's current offer and still higher than what we are asking for. PPS drivers are tasked with driving the most challenging routes and caring for the highest need students, so it should not come as a surprise that drivers are opting to take jobs with significant sign-on bonuses at a higher pay and less challenging work. Do the math. The equation is not sustainable. We have already discussed the significant cost of training and turnover. As more and more drivers begin to leave, these costs will only become a bigger burden. We have been flexible as we can afford to be. Now is the time for the school board to make a contract happen. Further heel dragging is in no one's interest, not the school district, not the bus drivers, and certainly not the students. Enough is enough. If the school board fails yet again to provide a fair contract, our union will have no choice but to seek means of redress that lay beyond good faith negotiation. A strike is an action of last resort, but after a year of negotiation and mediation, this is a step we are prepared to take. Our commitment to the children we serve is the reason we have shown patience for the past year. We care about the children we serve in this job and for their safety. But if the school board is unwilling to grant our reasonable demands, continue to undervalue our work, and fails to prioritize the needs of the children we serve, our appeal for a contract will have nowhere to turn but to the power of public opinion to force your hand. As the wave of teacher strikes across the country have shown, the sympathy of the public lays more firmly with the workers than with the bureaucracies that refuse to pay them a living wage.
Thank you for your comments this evening.
Next, we have Kira Kador and Chris Nelson.
Hi, Chris Nelson, N-E-L-S-O-N. I'm a Kairos board member and chair of the real estate committee. So I just wanted to come today to present a little overview and summary of our perspective on the lease renewal process that's in process. On Friday, the 22nd of June, Kairos submitted a formal LOI response to PPS's June 19th LOI. On a call with board leadership on July 6th, we were told that our response would only be considered by the full board and that we need to submit our proposed red line changes to the PPS's June 19th LOI in that manner. And that's why I'm here today, just because it is a full board issue. We did submit actually our written proposal today to Liz Large through our council. PPS board leadership on the call responded that our testimony at the last meeting expressing that you've had several meetings over the last 6 months regarding the lease. However, Kairos has not had any meetings with the leadership or staff specific to our December 7, 2017 lease proposal. Our leadership has had 2 conversations with the superintendent, the first discussing the possibility of a learning campus, and then the second when we delivered our proposal. But there were no specific lease terms proposed in either of those meetings. So until PPS board leadership responded and met with our representatives on June 19th, we have not had any formal communication after 6 months of requesting a meeting. Our board did not expect such a delayed formal response to our proposal, and we have been told that as a board, you need to fully approve any next proposal. So we submitted that today and are hoping that you'll give that full consideration. And 2 important points that we'd like to highlight. One, until last month, there was no communication of what the rent expectation would be, and we believe a 38% increase in the base rent from what we would have had from our prior extension is very unreasonable, and with less than 30 days notice. Additionally, there are changes to the existing obligations to maintenance, which have a huge cost impact. So we'd ask you to acknowledge those late game sort of realities as it relates to our program and financial situation as you consider our proposal. Secondly, what's most important is we need a 2-year term. We were told the main issue beyond leasing June 2019 is PPS needs to have swing space for what may come up as an unexpected need for the district. But we're not aware that PPS has any specific needs for the building after June 2019. Again, we're asking you to take these into consideration relative to our program requests. Last, it just feels like the way this is unfolded that PPS doesn't really view Kairos kids as PPS kids, and especially not the facilities for our community. And it feels like it's a function of our charter school status. So we believe our outcomes are good.
Can you wrap up your comments, please?
Yeah. Zalika Gardner presented those at the last meeting, and we think that those should be considered as you review our latest proposal. Thank you.
I'm Kira Kador, a PPS alum and the parent of 2 PPS students. At this moment, I want to ask every white person in this room, including myself, to remove the cloak of white privilege we wear and to put ourselves in the shoes of a black parent. Imagine, you no longer recognize the neighborhood in which you grew up, but you still have roots there. It makes you angry, knowing how disproportionately black children are disciplined at school and how big the achievement gap is. You also know that a positive educational experience is the crucial first step in arming your child with the tools they will need as adults in a world even more disproportionate and with life-threatening odds. What do you want for your child? Are you satisfied with the status quo? There's a lot of talk these days about reclaiming humanity in the wake of what is happening at our borders. For some of us, it ignites empathy and connectedness with all of our fellow human beings. At Kairos, we talk a lot about love for the same reasons. In love, there's not weakness, but strength. In love, there is restoration and strengthening of the fiber of our being, emotionally, socially, intellectually, and culturally. We all know the neuroscience study results that show that communities of love and belonging strengthen brain functions. So, at Kairos, we choose love. We know that is what it takes for our children to succeed, not just succeed academically, but to thrive as full human beings. We are reclaiming humanity and producing results. That is why it is frankly so sad to us that in the wake of these results, we are faced still with a school district that rejects what we have to offer. PPS has an equity policy that reads, Portland Public Schools must address and overcome this inequity and institutional racism, providing all students with the support and opportunity to succeed. Why doesn't this policy apply to the predominantly black and brown PPS students at Kairos? Does it just sound good but not mean anything? PPS needs to make a commitment and space for black students and to do so with an actual plan, not just words. A year-to-year commitment isn't the basis for a successful relationship. A long-term commitment is. We as committed partners need to focus on the success of our brown and black students. We need to find new ways to foster success and not repeat the same mistakes of those before us. Thank you.
Lastly, we have Lakeisha Griffins and Tiffany Penson.
My name is Lakeisha Griffin, Griffin, and I am an AmeriCorps Vista and the Communications Coordinator at Kairos PDX. Sitting before you all today feels very familiar to me. As a person of color, growing up in my schools, I was typically the only black student in the classroom. No matter how well I did and no matter how much I excelled, I had always to rely on myself and my family for validation because it was so scarcely given in schools. There was virtually no one who looked like me. I went through all of my K through 12 with less than 5 teachers of African American descent. Something many Oregonian children will experience, but that's not the case for Kairos kids. I was reminded only an hour before this moment about what it felt like to be seen in only a shallow way. Something as simple as making sure to have the correct pronunciation of a student's name who you're awarding a scholarship makes a difference in their self-image. Yet that extra step was not taken before this very meeting. Kairos is everything I could have hoped for in a school. While I made it out okay, I can't imagine where I would be if I had the education and social emotional support that our Kairos kids are getting so early on. The limits I feel today that directly stem from a lack of feeling seen and a lack of culturally responsive education would not exist if I had gone to Kairos. Having to advocate constantly for something, even though there is clear evidence that there is value, especially at Kairos when we're taking all the steps that no other organization in Portland has taken for underserved children and families, is unacceptable. To have to prove our worth and speak out to people who are blind to the evidence that our children are thriving when they're not expected to undermines our vision and shows a huge lack of empathy for communities of color and those who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. Research shows that when marginalized people experience prejudice publicly and bystanders do not intervene or provide support, the victim's feeling of loneliness and helplessness is magnified. From my personal perspective, PPS's silence and lack of willingness to negotiate a longer lease with Kairos is implicitly contributing to generational trauma that the African American community has been unwillingly subjected to, whether you see that or not. Especially in the current political and social climate, the value of having support from institutions like Portland Public Schools is not just extremely valuable to our school and to our organization, but also to each child of color, each community member of color, and each staff member of color at Kairos. Our vision is much bigger than what you see from us now. And like our children, as a young organization and school, we require stability and security and love to thrive. Humboldt in the historic North Portland area is our home, and rightfully so. All we need is your support and your love and a sense of urgency and verification that you're on this journey with us to ensure that Black student success is more than just an agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Tiffany Penson. That is P as in Paul, E-N-S-O-N. I am the vice chair of the Kairos board. I don't have the words to respectfully express my serious disappointment to be here for the third time asking for Kairos to stay placed at Humboldt for the next 2 years so we can continue the great work of providing culturally specific education for our children of color. This seems like a no-brainer to everyone except this entire board. It is criminal not to provide all youth with the opportunity to learn and a home to learn in, especially when we are doing great work that ultimately benefits PPS. You can talk about equity, inclusion, and courageous conversations all you want, but the board doesn't walk the talk. The board doesn't walk the talk. They are just buzzwords to you guys. We are tired of asking you to do what's right. We have tried to not take it personal or make it personal, but it is personal as it affects our youth and my people, which should be our people. I've always been told, don't listen to what people say, watch what they do. People will show you who they really are. My father always used to say that. Well, all of you are showing me who you really are. I often wonder, how do you look in the mirror every day when you are denying the most vulnerable population access to succeed by taking advantage of a great education? Frankly, it shows the lack of respect you have for Kairos students, staff, and most of all, yourselves. What cultures and practices have you changed, and for who? Julia, you just mentioned that you guys are proud of getting PPS back on track. That track hasn't been working for decades. You should be trying to create a new track that includes the great work of Kairos and real equity and inclusion. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment to address some of the comments that have been made, because we have over the last month shared our willingness to enter into a one-year lease and with a rent that reflects the space that's being used. In addition, I think one of the things that we've tried to share with the Kairos board and the community is that this has really been a hard year for PPS. We don't have enough facilities, and frankly, we've spent the last 6 months trying to make things work. And so we don't have extra space, and charter schools have an obligation to find their own facility. And we've believed that offering a one-year lease is a very fair thing to do and are willing to enter into it. But we also have our board has a fiduciary responsibility to PPS students, and we have a severe facilities need. And we've tried to offer a lease with terms that are both fair to Kairos, but also fair to the rest of the students at PPS. So I appreciate people coming and speaking tonight as well. Ms. Houston, do we have any other?
No, we do not.
Thank you. So at this point in time, we're going to shift the discussion to the Lincoln High School Master Plan. So Lincoln High School is one of 3 high schools being modernized or rebuilt through the May 2017 bond. It was master planned as part of the 2012 school building improvement bond, and the goal of the master plan is to develop comprehensive, equitable, integrated, and visionary high school campus concepts with authentic school community engagement. The master planning for Lincoln campus began in 2015 and was completed in 2016. Lincoln High School's construction is slated to begin in the summer of 2020. Tonight, the board's going to receive a presentation from staff and also the architect. In May of 2017, the estimated cost of the Lincoln rebuild was about $185 million, and now costs are projected to significantly increase. So we're going to have a discussion tonight both about the plan, but also the costs, and the costs within the larger 2017 bond. But why don't we start this evening? Superintendent Guerrero, am I calling on you? Are you calling on somebody to come up with a presentation, and then we can have a more discussion about how we're going to proceed with overall board consideration and action?
And I think that's our intended game plan. So we have joining us back again, Mr. Dan Young and team from our school modernization department.
Okay, thank you for the time tonight. I'm going to do a kind of quick introduction, and then I want to turn it over to Becca and Eric, who will walk everyone through the presentation tonight. And I think we can get the presentation queued up whenever we are ready. The goal of tonight's meeting is to provide additional information regarding the Lincoln High School modernization project as requested. To do a quick jump back in time and talk process just briefly, the Lincoln project is following a path that is similar to the Madison High School project, the path that it has followed recently. Both projects back in April presented information to the board that focused on reviewing what the current plans were versus other projects and the adopted ed specs. After that meeting, there was a joint steering committee with the Madison team, the Lincoln team, and the Benson modernization team that reviewed potential scope reduction and cost-saving options. That group concluded that there weren't any scope reductions below the base ed specs that they wanted to recommend going forward for any of the projects. After that meeting, Madison had their master plan approved back in May. Lincoln continued to refine the plan and hold internal and external stakeholder meetings, have DAG meetings, have additional steering committee meetings. And what you see before you tonight in the materials is the current plan as it sits now. So if there aren't any other immediate questions, I will turn over to Becca and Eric.
Great, thank you. Hello, my name is Eric Girding. I'm the Senior Project Manager for the Office of School Modernization and the Lincoln Project. And with me is
Becca Cavell with Bora Architects.
Great. Okay. Well, let's see. There's the clicker. So just we have a presentation here this evening. We'd like to first talk about the building program and the sort of master plan program as it has been proposed. Then Becca will get into the building and site design where it is now in the concept stage. And then we'll get into the project costs. Leave the fun part to the end here. So just real quick, I'd like to start just with reading the vision statement that was developed by the master plan committee that started work on this project in 2015. The redeveloped Lincoln campus will be an innovative hub of lifelong learning. It will help students reach their goals in a safe, inclusive, and inspiring environment. The campus will be the center of an active, healthy urban community and will support educationally related public and private partnerships. The project will be an example of schools promoting positive change in our neighborhood, city, state, and region. So this slide just shows you what are the planning principles that the PPS education specifications have set forth for all the modernization projects. And so these are some of the sort of concepts that we follow in the development of the design of the project, and this kind of governs all of our modernizations, and talking about having the school have a heart, have transparency so that we can kind of see the activities that are going on. One thing that's really important is having a facility that's flexible and agile, that is able to sort of shift over the years as our educational programs will shift. So here I'd like to just talk about the education specifications, the minimum requirements, and what are some preferred parts of the ed spec, and then optional, and then the proposed program. So in this first column, we see the PPS ed specs required minimum, which is this first column here. I'd also like you to note this top row here called the net program. That is the net usable square feet of the building. So that is the comprises the classrooms and the offices and all the learning and teaching spaces. At the bottom is a grand total which includes all of the what we call the gross square footage or common areas, hallways, bathrooms, support spaces, the building structure, things like that. So just want to focus on that kind of net usable area, which increases as you go through the requirements of the ed spec. So that first column, we have what is the minimum requirements, which has a net program area of 206,690 square feet, which comprises of classrooms, science labs, performing arts, career prep and CTE, athletics, education support, community partner space, teen parent center, health center, and then athletic facilities. So the next column here is showing the preferred spaces. And so within the ed specs, there are options to show, that talk about really what would be the preferred spaces. Really within that area, it's just larger spaces than what is that base minimum. So that the theater is a little bit larger, the servery and commons are a little bit larger, so that spaces are just a little bit bigger to better serve the functions of those programs. And then in the third column, we've got the optional spaces within the ed specs, which these are additional spaces that you could add to a building, either depending on the program on site, or within just some of the needs of the district that we may agree that we need additional space for that project. So that includes the choir room, multi-purpose media production, additional rooms for athletics, student support as far as a sick room, a library classroom, partner spaces, food pantries. You could see those are just additional spaces that would be above the minimum requirement. So then the last column is the proposed area program for Lincoln High School. And if you'll see, the net usable area is 206,800 square feet, which is just, 110 square feet above the base required minimum. And this has resulted in a process of the project team, along with the master plan committee and now the design advisory group and our steering committee, to really hone in on what are the base requirements and needs for Lincoln High School, and how can we provide the sort of best program space for the school, meeting the base minimums, knowing that we have challenges with our budget. And I'd like Becca to just go into a little bit more detail about the proposed program.
Thanks, Eric. So I'm just going to work through these quickly, noting that as with all of the high schools that you've already seen and approved, Lincoln has some very successful existing programs it's important that we continue to support. And so working with the people from the school and from the district, trying to understand how we can squeeze the ed spec requirements just a little to make room for a few extra things. And you see we're playing a sort of a zero-sum game in terms of the square footage of the building. So what have we added? We've added 3 art spaces over the required spaces to support existing highly successful programs, including CTE spaces such as product design. So we have some overlap between CT and art. We have a very successful photography program as well. And that's an important thing to keep and thrive in the building. Lincoln also has a highly successful choir program that currently has a completely inadequate room, and we're going to the third column there, the preferred program, to add the choir room from the ed spec to the school. We would love to have a full-sized wrestling room. Lincoln, as many of your high schools do, has a very successful wrestling program. Currently, that is entirely off-site. We have managed to squeeze half of that for a half-size wrestling room into the building, which is better than none. We also have, as you know, an IB program at Lincoln that needs some small rooms specific to that program, and we've squeezed a suite of those in also. And finally, we have a very, very flexible large room that is multifunctional, flat-floored, that supports things such as Model UN, mock court, the Constitution team, the debate team, large school gatherings, and so on. And that's a highly useful space to the building. It's located in the library, so when it's not being used for any of those programs, or if it's never being used for those programs, it can also be used as a spill space for library use, because our library is undersized. It's at the minimum of the ed spec requirement. So how did we gain the extra space but not increase the size of the building? We have a list of things here that we achieved. We reduced the size of each of our classrooms. We still can squeeze the students in. They're just not as capacious as the ed spec would like them to be. We've also done the same with our science classrooms. And we have given some of the teacher planning spaces back to classroom use. We're going to be very careful to make sure we have adequate teaching planning, but everything is being squeezed in this project. Finally, the media center is reduced, as I had mentioned previously. We also have extremely inadequate athletic facilities. Eric's going to get into that in more detail in just a minute. Yes.
Just to be clear, on the items that are asterisked at the ends, those are all deviations from the ed spec, right?
Correct.
They're non-compliance with the ed spec.
None of these are in compliance with the ed spec. Yeah.
Right, and I guess I'd like to maybe give a clarifying comment regarding that. This has been general practice for all of the bond modernization projects to adjust what is a generic ed spec to align the program to the specific needs of the school site. It's actually stated in the ed spec documents as a consideration that document is not just a prescribed kind of menu for all of our schools, that each project does some tailoring and alignment for the program on site. I'd say a good example of that would be at Franklin High School, where there was an existing wood shop and metal shop program that was highly popular and thriving. And so in the modernization of Franklin High School, we built a modernized wood shop and metal shop. Those spaces are not required by the ed spec, and they're not even optional spaces in the ed spec. But again, that was the sort of the overall approach that we've taken to our modernizations, where we adjust that program and ed spec to the specific needs on the program at the site.
Go to the next slide.
Sure.
I don't know, if people have a preference that we ask questions as we go, or do you want to wait till the end? Ask while we go. Okay, so I've got a couple questions about this specific slide. Dan, take us back to Madison. I think what they said on the ed specs is the only thing they had beyond the ed specs was an oversized cafeteria because they had a lot of kids who actually used the school cafeteria to eat lunch. Is that correct? Is that I thought that was the only thing they said that went beyond the ed specs.
I'd have to double check. Certainly the common space is larger, which accommodates the eating area. I think there were some other additional spaces. The total size of Madison is a little bit larger than Lincoln, but that has to do with the existing facility size.
Right,
It's not getting
just
larger.
the structure, not that they're getting larger classrooms.
Correct, but I'd have to double check that and see exactly what those spaces
Yeah,
were.
I'm pretty sure that
be
was
right.
stated several times, that was the one thing they got over. And then I want to just talk about the science classroom. It looks like a reduction. What did we end up doing at Madison? This says here the 1375. What was the size of the Madison?
I'll have to double check that as well. I don't recall offhand.
I understand that it's the same reduction in size, that the Madison science classrooms are also through 1375.
And then the IB rooms, what are those? So my kids took IB there, but there's a special, are you saying there's a special room?
They're very, very tiny rooms that are for interviews. The IB students have to take interviews, and we can double them up as small study rooms, but the IB students are given materials to prep and then are interviewed as part of the IB program. So it's not a whole lot of space, but it's specific to the IB program.
And then just, I'm trying to understand the reductions you have in that column. So the pluses and the minuses, is that what you're saying gets you to 82,000 square feet? I'm trying to understand the math. This number at the bottom of the column, what is that?
That's our gross building area, which is the total building area. So that is when you add back in all the hallways, the mechanical spaces, the elevators, and so on. And I was going to speak to that actually, and I could speak to that right now if you would like and explain the difference.
I wanted to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. When I'm looking at the far right-hand column, the 82,000 number?
Is that number?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that is
The
what we're
grossing
calling the
factor.
grossing factor.
So that is that. So the first answer is no. All of the spaces that we're looking at in that column total up to the number at the top, the 206,800 square feet. So we are, I believe, 110 square feet over the ed spec minimum size for the building, and we've done it with squeezing some spaces in order to add a little bit more in. When we look at the bottom of the column, we see that, is it 82,000 square feet? That is on the size of the whole building. And if you look at the very bottom line and read those totals across, if you start on the left-hand side and you see the total gross square feet for the EdSpec minimum, where it's 281,098 square feet, that should be, if we could have the same grossing factor as the EdSpec required minimum, we would be the exact same size as that. And we're not, we're a little higher. That's the difference between that 289,261 and the 281,098 square feet. And the reason that Lincoln hasn't quite managed to achieve the net to gross ratio that is desirable for a brand new building is that, and you'll see this in the next slides, Lincoln has some unique constraints that make it into a tall building. And when you have a tall building, you have things such as more elevators, and you have them on every floor. A typical high school might have one elevator that serves 2 or 3 or maybe 4 floors, but we have multiple elevators serving multiple floors. We have a janitor's closet on every floor, so more janitor's closets. We have more stairs and the associated space. We have more mechanical shafts and so on. And so it adds up. And we've done our best and will continue to try to squeeze this as hard as we can, but right now, this is where we're at.
And just, I guess, just a comment about the baseball and the softball fields.
Yes.
So they do have a baseball field. It just is not nearby. I mean, it's Gabriel Park. Well, my son played there for 4 years for Lincoln. I mean, so I guess it wouldn't be like,
yeah,
if we had more money, we could put a baseball field in. There is a baseball field. It's just not contiguous
they
to the
don't
site.
have access to a baseball field on their adjacent to their school. Yes,
But they,
absolutely. Correct. But not every school has every athletics piece, and we're going to get to that in just a minute.
yeah, when we get to Cleveland, I mean, just being an urban district and having a school in a confined space, but it's not like they don't have a baseball field, and they've got to have a softball field. I didn't have a daughter that played softball, but my son did play baseball at Gabriel, so it seems like we should capture that because they're not going to get a baseball field on the site. So what is it that needs to be done to have it be a real baseball field, or to make it so that we're meeting the ed specs, because they're going to have a baseball field, just not contiguous, right?
But the issue that comes up with not having with fields on site is transportation to practice. And we face that, most schools face that for the freshman and JV baseball and softball squads have to go all over, and they're usually in kids' cars doing that, and that's an issue.
I'm having driven my freshman and sophomore son for several years between Lincoln and Gabriel Park, where that. But I guess the reality is, even if we said we wanted that, there's not space for a baseball field. So the question is, then how do you, like, we're going to have a baseball field and a softball field, and how do we supply it? But it shouldn't be marked as that we're not going to meet the ed specs, because there is going to be a baseball and a softball field, just like we're going to have a baseball and softball field at Grant.
Well, I'm just going to say this is ed spec is on site. It's not on site, so that's not meeting the ed spec. We can agree to disagree on this one.
Right.
Moving right along.
While we're on this
Yes.
page, and this is just me being dim, so on the grossing factor, you've got numbers and then at 36% and at 39%. What's the percent?
That means that for every 1 net square feet, we have 0.39 not usable in a classroom type of square feet that makes up for a whole building. So it's the ratio between the two numbers.
Oh, okay.
Total building area when you compare it to the net assignable square feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 82,700, sorry, just so I know what we're talking about. 82,720 square feet is 39% of 206,800? Is that what you're saying?
I would have to sit down and do the math to understand the ratio. But yes, that's the intent. There are different ways to express it, and I'm not sure if you actually put that on your calculator. That's how it would turn out. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It may be just be the percentage of the overall.
But it's an equivalent ratio to all the other ones you see across the bottom line there.
Okay. Another question?
Yes, several. Thank you. I'm sorry. On the second column, you list a larger servery as something that would be desirable. And of course, Lincoln's cafeteria situation has been a scandal for many years. Okay, what's Lincoln's cafeteria actually going to be able to handle? Are we finally going to have Lincoln's kids actually able to eat? Are they actually going to be taken care of? What are the details on that, since you raised the issue here?
Yes, well, our goal, of course, is to have all students on campus having lunch, if that's possible. And part of the reason, now that there's really no cafeteria space, very little, and so the students, they just disperse. So with the new plan, we have a generous commons area and servery that has adjacent outdoor space that's covered. That the idea is that this is part within the kind of the heart of the school on the main floor, which would be really kind of an active zone that we're hoping that students would be wanting to be there and having lunch, and that we would certainly provide the space and facility for that.
Okay, so
We're meeting the EdSpec requirement for the cafeteria. It's way larger than what Lincoln has right now, which, as you know, is seriously compromised. This second column is an option to expand beyond that baseline, but what we will be providing is far beyond what Lincoln currently has, and is basically the EdSpec standard.
Okay, and I'm not familiar with the EdSpec standard for cafeterias, so, in common terms, Lincoln has 1,700 kids. Are 1,700 kids going to be able to get lunch?
1,700 kids would never actually get lunch in any high school, but I believe we can seat 600 at one time in the proposed design, and which is plenty adequate.
Okay, thank you. You, in the third column, you proposed adding a sick room, and you're going to have a health center, which is good.
Sorry.
Just since you were looking at adding capacity, are we concerned that the capacity we have is not sufficient?
Well, unfortunately, we can't add capacity to Lincoln High School. We're designing Lincoln High School to meet the education specification, which is for 1,700 students. That extra plus one sick room is an extra sick room. And so we do have a health center. We also have a nurse's station and a sick room within the administrative suite. So we have two ways to serve unwell students.
Okay. Then in the fourth column, adding the half-size wrestling room.
Yes.
Several of our new high schools have full-size wrestling rooms, which are also doubling as dance space. I understand the wrestling season is very short. I know nothing about it, but I understand the season is short, and it makes fabulous space for dance. And I know that Lincoln has a very good dance program. Have we looked at other space for the dance program? I am afraid that we may be shorting them with that.
So there are two types of dance, and Lincoln has a very robust program for each. One is competitive dance, and that will practice mostly in the auxiliary gym. The dance studio that in the EdSpec can be doubled as a wrestling space is also a very robust program, and that's for movement and yoga and dance and so on. We have talked extensively with PPS about the conflict between the needs for a dance room with mirrors and the function of a wrestling room with mats and kids throwing one another to the walls. And it's not safe, in our opinion, which is why if for some reason Lincoln is unable to provide the half-size wrestling room that we're currently proposing, the alternative would probably be to use the auxiliary gym for wrestling with mats that would be lifted out of the way, but that means that the auxiliary gym can't be used for its other functions. So it's what do you displace? That's really the question.
Okay. Thank you.
So there is a dance space already?
We have a dance and movement room, which is sort of a yoga room, and the competitive dance program, which is excellent at Lincoln, will use the auxiliary gym when it's practicing.
Okay.
Any further questions, or can we move on to the?
Can I ask about the Model UN and Constitution room?
Absolutely.
How is that different from a regular classroom?
It's larger. It's 2,000 square feet. Ideally, it would have been larger than that, but to get our program down to size, we had to carve some space out of it. So a typical classroom at Lincoln is now 930 square feet, so it's double that size, and that's to be able to accommodate the students and the viewers, the spectators in that room, and also so that it does function all these other needs as well, including the mock court and the Constitution team and so on. So it's a larger room that's going to be a great amenity to the school.
It also provides some long-term flexibility as far as having a larger space that could be used for other programming. If there's a CTE program that is looking for a larger space, this does provide that kind of flexibility.
What's the square footage for a classroom in Madison? Is it 930?
I think it is 930, and which I think with both Lincoln and Madison, I can double check that. Obviously, I have the information as the largest of the schools that have been modernized. The other ones have been smaller.
Okay.
And how many of those IB interview rooms are there?
How many of the IB interview rooms are there? I believe we have 6, and I think they're 80 square feet each. I can check. It'll take me a moment. I'll come back to
Okay.
that one. Sorry.
Any further questions on this point, or can we do have a
I'm
number
just
of
trying to
things?
understand also the columns.
Sure.
So I think when there was the $100 million budget gap that appeared, we asked schools to come in with the sort of what meeting the ed specs requirements, and not going below that, because we didn't want to diminish in a way that significantly diminished the educational experience. So I just want to be clear, that would be the left column, correct? That's the.
So
This
the
column
left
here?
column is, so the ed specs have a range, and so the left column is the bottom end of the range, so that is basically meeting bare minimum. The middle two columns are options for increasing the size of those. When we met I think it was in April, when we first started talking about the budget issues, we came forward with options for reducing scope and getting back into budget, but that was reducing below the bare minimum there, so it had been under the 206,000 net.
Right, but I guess if you were to say we're going to do the base high school, it would be the left-hand column.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And to clarify then, what we are proposing for Lincoln is the far right-hand column, which meets that base minimum requirement.
But so does the left, correct?
Correct. And so what we just described was how we took that ed spec generic program and aligned it with the Lincoln program needs on the site. Okay.
Keep going until somebody asks a question.
Okay, this is just a basic comparison, just looking at the other high schools that have been modernized or will be modernized in the bond program. So it's not all of our high schools, but it's just looking, just a general comparison of the size of the facility, the capacity that it's designed to. So the size meaning the GSF is gross square footage. The capacity that it's designed to, the actual enrollment in the last school year, and then the resulting sort of square foot per student based on that actual enrollment. And so we know Benson's a bit of an outlier just because it's a large building, and because of the CTE programs there, and that the enrollment has been capped there. But looking at Madison, Grant, the new Lincoln proposal, Franklin, and then Roosevelt, just wanting to show where the new Lincoln project kind of aligns when we're comparing the modernized schools, and so the resulting area and area per student. So of course that area per student will fluctuate over time as enrollment fluctuates.
So, Director Bailey, from your committee, what are the number of hardship petitions? Do you know into Lincoln? I'm just wondering of the 1,700, what of the neighborhood?
No, it's not as few as I would have thought. Yeah, and I don't know if it was 20 or 40 but I'm not. I can look for that as we go along. I might have that. I don't have it with me.
Okay, then next, this is just looking at the athletic facilities of those schools, and of course based on the discussion a few minutes ago, this is just looking at what's being provided on site or at an adjacent park facility. So if we're talking about Gabriel Park for baseball, that's a few miles away. We're talking about sort of what athletic facilities are provided at each of the high schools. And then at the bottom line, that just shows that what facility is provided by Portland Parks and Rec property. So this just shows that kind of what we're able to provide either on-site or adjacent with Lincoln. And as we know that it's an ongoing struggle to get athletics facilities for Lincoln, and it is off-site in various locations. So this is also just one of the things that is, besides our site constraints, that is really driving us to really minimize the building footprint and maximize the amount of site area for our athletic facilities.
And I'm sorry, what does the symbol, the check with a minus sign indicate?
Check with a minus sign indicates that it is not meeting what the EdSpec requirement is, because the EdSpec requirement requires a separate soccer field from football, because they operate in the same season, and so we have a track and field and combined football and soccer field, which also occurs at Roosevelt and Grant.
And Director Constam, I have the very strong recollection that at one point Lincoln was still going to have tennis courts. Did those get taken away, or did I imagine that?
It was part of the discussion in the early master planning around trying to accommodate it on the roof, and there was a lot of advocacy for that, and there was a lot of advocacy from the community for integrating tennis courts and or swimming pool in partnership with Portland Parks and Rec. But we just couldn't get, or to date rather, couldn't get any traction with Parks and Rec on actual investment in shared uses there. So that's where that landed.
Oh, okay. That was not
But there
where
was
I
a lot of
remembered
advocacy.
that them going to be. I thought they were going to be at the east end of the field. No?
We've done a number of site studies to try to get tennis on the site, and the limitations with that is that you actually need four full courts to actually have the sport function for a tournament and so forth. So to get that amount of tennis court on the site was really a challenge with us related to the area that the track and field takes, the on-site parking, and also some of the requirements that we have just from our soils conditions, and it's really difficult for us to build right up against the property line for something like that, so it was making tennis courts very expensive to build as well, and we just couldn't fit them on the site. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The hardship petitions approved were less than 10 a year.
Right.
So I've got 2 years here. Last year, 8, and 8, and 3 years ago, 9. Probably about 35 to 40 kids total.
Okay.
So I have a more, just a philosophical question, but this, Dan, probably for you. So we know we're going to have these sports at the school. I mean, we have them now. So whose responsibility is that? Is like, did we say that's the principal's, like, it's not on site, they've got to go, or the athletic director, they've got to go hustle and find a site? Or does the district actually look at it as its responsibility centrally to provide that? So if we don't have it on site, then we're going to go negotiate with Parks or, you know, whoever it is, and make sure that the facility, I mean, Gabriel Park, while it's a baseball field, it's not a very good one. So how do we approach that? Because I'm just concerned, if I look at all these red checks and then I think about what's happening with Grant and the softball field, it's sort of a, well, we're getting the building built, but then we've got this other issue that who's responsible for it, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question. My understanding is that the athletic department here at PPS, they negotiate different contracts with where to play on various fields, and mostly that's Parks property. There's lots of different agreements of how that works. But the athletic department, Marshall Haskins, I know, we talk to him regularly, especially when we talk about what we're going to do with temporary facilities. So for 3 years, Lincoln will not have any fields to play on. So for 3 years, we're working with him of where we'll be able to house those facilities. As far as permanence goes, it's, I believe, his department is who makes those negotiations.
But and they do, but there isn't ultimate accountability at the district for making those accommodations. There are often times when teams are just left to their own devices. I mean, wrestling, both at the high school and the middle school level for Lincoln, literally had nowhere to practice until the parent advocates found space at Skyline Elementary, which is 20 miles out a dark, windy road from the high school. So it centrally, we do a good job of trying to accommodate that, but it often falls back to the high school and to the individual coaches and parent advocates to figure it out.
And the transportation, of course, is a challenge because that usually falls on the teams and the families.
And it's a huge equity issue because there's no district-provided transportation for for JV and freshman sports, and so if you've got two working parents, you're out of luck if you don't have facilities on site.
And our partnership with Parks is fluid and a little slightly off topic. Parks has suggested that if we at Grant use the north of Grant field for softball, which would reduce the size of a youth soccer field, then they would convert the field that's currently a softball field up at Wilshire Park into a soccer field, which would make the practice location for JV freshman softball problematic, even more so than it is now.
Problems in search of a slightly more comprehensive solution.
I would also
Yes.
mention that it's an equity issue because team transportation, I understand, is more expensive for West Side schools than it is for East Side schools.
That's further.
Yes, and the bus barn is currently on the east side of the river, so our West Side schools end up paying a premium.
Okay, I'd like to move on to the next slide, if that's okay. So this is a description of some additional program needs and requests that have been made by staff and people, so running programs at the school in our program and concept phase of the project, where we're refining the master plan and the needs for program space at the school. This is additional program space that has been requested, but we have removed it from the proposed plan to reduce our costs. But I'd like Becca just to describe a little bit about that and the conversations that kind of came to where this landed.
Thanks, Eric. So, as we mentioned before, Lincoln has a very, very successful, robust music program, that's band and choir. They would very much like to have more practice rooms than the EdSpec minimum. There is an EdSpec in expanded program in that second column that you saw earlier that does add practice rooms, but we feel that we can't do that. We will share practice rooms between choir and choir can probably use some of the spaces in the school as well that are not dedicated practice rooms. So that's the first one. Lincoln's art programs are thriving. It has 2 photography programs and a videography program. It has digital and analog or traditional film photography. And those 2 programs would like to have their own classrooms, but there is simply not enough space in the program to do that, and so they'll be consolidated into probably a single shared classroom. We have a couple of other ways to share space as well. We have talked about wrestling. The large wrestling room does not seem to be an option to the school. And we'll talk, I think, a little later about a hitting facility for baseball and softball as well. And as Eric mentioned before, the shop programs are optional. Oh, I've gone very echoey. Step back. And Lincoln would love to have a wood shop and a metal shop. CTE is thriving. Portland is a maker city these days, but there simply is not enough space on the site and enough space in our program to provide that. That's an amenity that is not available to Lincoln students.
So I'm curious why, for example, the choice was made, for example, to have, I can't go back, say the Model UN room versus, wood shop or metal. I mean, it seems like it would serve different constituencies
These are difficult choices that each high school has to make. And the CTE program for Lincoln looks to sharing Benson. If students who do want to really study those programs, there's an option to go to Benson to do that.
Like in a co-op model?
Yes. And also the flex room that would serve the Model UN Constitution debate team, that's an existing program at Lincoln that we're trying to provide space for. The request for the shop is a program that doesn't currently exist, but they would like to add that to the school. And so that was kind of a different conversation, which is why that was sort of a lower priority to provide within the minimum.
We do have a product design program at Lincoln, an existing one that will provide some hands-on maker activities in an analog way. So using looms and so on, but just not a full-scale wood shop. Those are very space-intensive. They also need to be on the first floor of the building, and we'll get into that a little bit in a minute as well.
So what are the CTE programs that are, I know some CTE programs can be in a classroom, just a regular classroom, so there's flexibility. What are the specific CTE spaces that are included in this plan?
For Lincoln, they do have a business program. Culinary arts is thriving at Lincoln, and we have a very robust suite of culinary arts classrooms in the program. We have communications and journalism, which is a computer classroom, and I believe graphic design as well, which is also a computer classroom. So we tend to be very technology intensive. And then product design, as I mentioned earlier, which is in the arts area, and that is not 3D printing and laser cutting. That is weaving, looming, sewing, and a little bit, and small wood tools.
Okay, but aside from those programs that are computer intensive, are they different from a regular size classroom?
Only the product design space. And as with all of the high schools, and the EdSpec has a maker space within it that is a resource within the CTE section of the EdSpec program, and that is a general resource for everybody in the school. So we do have that to align with the EdSpec minimum requirement. we move on.
So can I, I want to make sure I heard this right. So the request for the wood and/or metal shop.
Yes.
You're not doing that because you're assuming some kind of co-op arrangement with Benson?
We're not assuming a co-op arrangement with Benson. There's effort going on at the district level, and I don't know, Dan, if you want to speak to this, but all the high schools are looking at their CTE programs, and high schools are identifying which CTE programs they have or want to expand to, and the district is identifying certain programs to be held at certain schools. And so Lincoln's list includes an option that woodshop could be at Benson. And this is, I don't think, a final document. It's a work in progress.
So I guess, and I raised this issue at Madison as well, is if 12 to 15% of our kids are hands-on kids, and what programs do we have both district-wide and at each school to hook those kids in, because that's what they want to do, and help them discover that that's what they want to do. And so that's part of our push-pull with the Madison design right now is whether we have the resources to expand into a full wood shop there. And that's something I threw out for Lincoln as well. And we know, how many Lincoln cluster kids go to Benson? It's about 8 a year.
This year, 9.
9.
Yep.
9 total.
We're up 1.
9 total?
No, incoming freshmen.
Incoming freshmen, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, that says, I mean, there's a whole conversation to be had there about, there's got to be way more Lincoln kids who would thrive in a more hands-on CTE setting. How are we going to do that? And I kind of worry that, Lincoln's sort of ongoing reputation as the college-bound school really does a disservice to some of the kids at, its career and college, and college including AA degree, and it should be apprenticeship in there as well.
And I don't have a
Yeah,
specific
no
answer.
response
I
needed.
just, I think maybe make the note that these are very tough decisions, and obviously balancing the space constraints, the budget constraints. The project team meets with, the internal stakeholders, different education departments, dozens of times throughout the course of planning and programming, and also meets with the steering committee to try and get to what is the best solution. But there's not always a one clear, this is the best solution.
But that's why there's also a premium on designing flexible spaces.
Correct, good point.
Now, I want to make sure that I'm understanding what you said before. Starting with shop space, it sounded like you were saying you just physically can't fit the thing into the building with the footprint you've got. Because, again, very tiny footprint, and it's got to go on the ground floor. Is that correct? You don't have a big enough plunger to force that thing onto the campus? Is that right? Or do we need to look at solutions?
When we look at the site plan and the floor plans, we can talk about how we might achieve a wood shop and metal shop in the project.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you, that's a
Yeah.
good answer. Moving up, wrestling room, I assume you've got the same space premium issues with the athletic space. But could you actually increase the wrestling room to a full-size wrestling room?
The building is very tight,
Mm-hmm.
and if money was no object, if space was no object, we could probably do a full-size wrestling room. It's challenging.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and I mean, if just looking at previous slides, Grant versus Lincoln, 4,000 square feet doesn't sound like much when it's 290,000 square feet, but then you break it down to 4,000 square feet can get you almost the wrestling room plus the wood shop or some combination of your other. I take it this is part of, if we had a little more money, this is kind of what we throw it at?
Well, I
And
mean,
some other things
these
to come
spaces,
along.
we were, based on those meetings, with the stakeholders, with the folks at Lincoln and the community, we wanted to include, these spaces in our proposal. But that's where we were, looking at our budget challenge here and saying, well, okay, if we have to draw the line, where are we going to draw the line? And these are the additional requests that we felt like, if we have to lose something, those are items that we feel like we don't want to live without, but we could. We're all having to make difficult decisions.
Yeah. And that's the same process we've been through with each of the schools, which is the minimum ed spec requirements and then the preferred ed spec, meeting the preferred ed spec, and then coming down generally somewhere in the middle. Yeah.
And these would be roughly 4 to 5 million additional to add all of these?
Correct.
Thanks.
Okay, well, if there aren't any further questions, I think we'd like to move to the next slide here. And I'd like to kind of hand it over to Becca. She's going to get into just the site plan, the building organization, and just remember at this point we are about 4 months behind the design process where Madison is. So we're just getting into schematic design. So the drawings and things that you saw from Madison are the kind of full schematic designs. So we just don't have that level of development yet. So you'll be looking at more of a diagrammatic expression of the design. So we don't have hallways and doors and windows and things like that. So bear with us. Here's the
Great.
driver.
So we're going to start with the site with the existing school on it. So that is the diagram that you see up now. Lincoln is to the east of the site, next to the depressed I-405. The fields are to the west of the site, and we're bounded to the north by Salmon, to the west by 18th. So we'll be talking about those. A block south of our site is Jefferson Street, which you all know well. It's a very busy street. It's also a focus of a neighborhood redevelopment effort by the city. There's a lot of construction going on in this neighborhood in general. By the time the new school opens in 2022 and 2023, this neighborhood is already going to be transformed, and Lincoln is going to be contributing to that. So I'm going to talk about some of the issues and the constraints on the site and some of the opportunities. We have the great pleasure of being in downtown Portland. We have great transit. We have buses, and we have the MAX lines that bound the site to the west, causing their own problems, of course, but students can get to this school very easily. They can't get to sports events necessarily after school, but they can get to school. Along with that, we have congestion. We have some serious intersections where traffic backs up, and when parents are dropping students off or buses are dropping students off, we do have some issues with that. The yellow spots show the congestion. We have some safety issues at some of those intersections, and we have some safety issues on the existing site. You'll see that the red sort of dots you see on the site show where the site isn't necessarily safe. There isn't necessarily an easy way to get out of the site. There are some places that don't have a lot of oversight, that are kind of tucked away. And the school itself, its front door, is about as hidden as you could imagine in a school that's pretty hidden. So it has very little visibility, even though it's in the middle of the city. Lots of people aren't really aware that Lincoln High School is there. We also have a couple of things that we're going to come back to over and over. You see the sort of black hatched lines through the middle of the site. Eric's going to do a little pointing here. Thanks, Eric. Those are the positions of the former 17th and 16th Avenues. Those have city utilities in them, including Tanner Creek. In both of those streets. They're vacated streets, but there are easements that mean there are no build zones. We cannot put a building on those former street locations. Also, because Tanner Creek used to run through the site, it ran at a lower elevation. It was actually in the Goose Hollow. It was actually a cut in the landscape, and the stream was at the bottom of that cut. And over the years, those streams were culverted, and that cut has been filled in with undocumented fill. We have terrible soil conditions on this site, and that's contributing to the costs to develop it. We need very significant foundations to get down to bearing soils. So we have some challenges through the topography. And speaking of topography, you might think this is a flat site, but it's not. There's, I think, 30 or 40 feet of grade change from corner to corner on the site. And so how we get into the site is actually a really key issue, because we want our entire ground floor to ideally be at one level for universal access and ease of movement reasons. So I guess the final thing to say on this slide is that I-405, even though it's depressed, is a source of some noise, and so we want to be cognizant of that. And as you're all aware, because of all of these various site constraints and the desire and the need to keep the students in the existing school while the new school is being built, because there is a complete dearth or lack of search space in this area for students to occupy during school construction, the new school is going to be built to the west. It's going to be built to the west of that no-build zone that 17th Avenue represents, and so it's within that one block between 18th and 17th is where the new school is going to sit. So the next slide shows the floor plan, and as Eric said, this is purely a diagram. Let's talk about, I guess I need to talk about construction phasing first. So the students will stay in the existing building while the new building is built. The red dotted line shows the safety fencing that will be around the construction site. During construction, it's going to be really important that we keep the kids safe. And so being really clear with the contractor when they're on board about how we control the safety of the site, allow them to operate a good construction site, but also make sure that the kids are safe for drop-off as well as for being in school. So that's what you see here. We will be maintaining the majority of the parking spaces on the site. There are 100 parking spaces right now used by staff for Lincoln, and we'll have most of them available during the 2 years it's going to take to build the new school, which will open in 2022. For those 2 years, there will be no athletics on site whatsoever, other than in-school, in-gym athletics. The next slide shows what happens after the new school opens. The entire rest of the site will be shut down and fenced for security reasons. It's a construction zone for a year while the existing school has hazardous materials abatement achieved and is demolished, and the new fields are built where the existing school is. For this 1 year, there will be no parking available or very little parking available to anybody on the site, and that's going to be one of the challenges for construction and for operating the new school for that first year. We're hoping everybody will be so thrilled to be in the new school that they'll make do with no parking. Keep them happy somehow.
If I could, please.
Yes.
For both of these construction scenarios, you show construction access on alternately 17th and 16th. And you have both of those streets identified as safety concerns. Are those safety concerns the line of sight, pedestrian type of issues, or is there going to be a problem with construction access?
Yeah, the safety concerns are about the existing conditions that we see related to campus. So during construction it's mostly because they're very, those areas are kind of tucked away and very kind of little eyes on the ground there. So
Okay.
that'll be
Good.
different during
Thank you.
construction.
I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully the next slide will be our floor plan.
No, sorry.
Actually, no, we're going to talk about the downtown plan. So, as we mentioned, this is the only school that is in downtown Portland. It's also the only school in the PPS district that is subject to the requirements of the Central City Plan, which is the zoning design overlay district that affects all of downtown. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, this is going to result in some increased design requirements and therefore cost requirements for the site. So we see them listed here. We're going to be required to have active ground floor uses in large areas of glass at the ground floor of the building, and there are some costs associated with that. 60% of our roofs, with no exception, are required to be green roofs for this building, and that's a significant cost increase. And to prevent bird strikes, so to stop birds from flying into the building and killing themselves on the grass because there are trees reflected in the windows, we have to treat a portion of the glass in this building in a way that mitigates bird strikes. That's the bird-friendly glazing. we have to have a significant amount of covered bike parking. That's a downtown central city requirement. And we're also required, and this is a quote from the code, to provide materials that promote permanence and express skilled craftsmanship. So high quality materials. Not that you don't do that with all of your schools, because they are long-term investments in buildings, but it's something that we're required to do in the downtown area. And this, again, is the only school that is in the central city plan.
Roughly, what's the add-on cost for meeting those standards?
We have that in a summary later on, and Eric is going to come to that for you. Thanks. Sorry, I keep deferring questions.
And maybe this will be deferred as well, but so when we had the original cost estimates, I'm just looking at this sheet right here where you have the sort of original to revised, and you have a $40 million increase in the cost of construction. Were these requirements in place when we did the first cost estimates?
No, they were not.
So this is an additional overlay.
Yeah, this is sort of discovery.
Okay.
Sense.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is based on the new 2035 plan that's been approved by the city. And during our master planning process, we just had draft documents of those code changes, and it did not include these items.
And so, speaking of the code changes, I would like to commend the district for working really hard with the city to ensure there's some language in the new codes that are advantageous to Lincoln's site and to PPS in general. So we have a list of them here. The surface parking for 100 spaces, that was a big deal. The new plan requires no parking without a building over it or a building that is part of it in the central city plan. This site, high school or school sites, excuse me, are exempt from that requirement thanks to some strong efforts at the district.
Can I ask for the surface parking?
Yes.
What are the other high schools doing in terms of surface parking? How does this compare?
Well, actually, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. I mean, I think all the schools have surface parking. Lincoln is the only school that's in the downtown area.
Right.
And so it's a result of that the city's code requires that or denies you the ability to have any parking without having it covered, not just covered, but covered with the building. We had hoped we could cover it with the grandstand, but in fact we were told early on that no, it has to be actually a whole building. And there's absolutely no ability to fund that. So it's not that other schools don't have parking, it's that Lincoln is the only school that would be required to have covered parking, and we don't have to do that thanks to this exemption.
Right, no, I get that.
But what do other schools
But
have?
my other question is, what are we doing in other schools?
Yeah, most of the schools, I believe, don't have any off-street parking requirements. Most of the sites do have some, but certainly not enough to house all the student body and everything else. That said, they also, certainly some of the other schools are urban, but not in the downtown core. So parking is more of a challenge on street at Lincoln than the other schools.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to push a little here. I used to work downtown. Parking is, I'll be polite and say problematic. It's also extremely expensive. But you know that walking in. When you have a job downtown, there you go. I mean, it's, there's Macs all over the place, there's buses, they've designed downtown to not be particularly friendly to car traffic. So it just kind of is what it is. So I guess my question is, if we didn't have 100 parking spaces built into this, what else could we do with that land that might be able to satisfy some of these other things?
But these 100 are for teacher parking, correct? So this is also a contract. Well, no, actually, it's not
No, it's
required
not.
by the
It's not.
contract.
No, it's
yeah,
not.
but it's not. There's no designated student parking.
Right,
Correct.
but I
It's
mean,
for
just-
staff
This
only.
is staff only.
Parking at Benson is a pain
Yeah.
too.
So-
We're not talking about adding 100 parking spaces to the Benson site.
So part of this plan is also our work with the neighborhood, the Goose Hollow Foothills League. The Lincoln campus is within a permitted parking area. So we currently have approximately 100 spaces on site now. So the intent was for us to maintain what was existing. If we were to reduce or just wholesale eliminate our on-site parking, I think we'd have a tough negotiation with the adjacent neighborhood because we would more or less be offloading our parking requirements to the neighboring streets. And that is a challenge already, as you know, that parking is a challenge in the urban area. If, I mean, it would be forcing that to occur, and I know that the city does a lot of sort of forcing traffic issues with changing things and forcing behavior to change.
Right.
But I'd say it would certainly be a challenge where we would need to go back to the community and talk to them about that. Your question regarding what could we provide on site in lieu of parking, that isn't something that we have studied. So I can't just answer that, but we may be able to provide some either additional plaza space, or we might be able to get those tennis courts on site.
That's what I'm thinking.
But it's a trade-off question that I think that from the project team, we would need leadership direction on what to do on that.
Well, and the neighborhood issue is not insignificant, because in the process of development of the several huge apartment and condominium buildings that are going in the adjacent 2 to 3 blocks, that's been a huge issue with the neighborhood, how much parking would be accommodated for all that high-density development.
I mean, I get all that.
Yeah.
Okay, trust me, I hate taking the Max downtown. I hated it when I worked downtown. But I did it because otherwise, I mean, half of my salary went to parking. And it just seems to me like we keep talking about what a constrained space this is. And 100 parking spaces, really, that's the best we can do? I mean, it doesn't seem to me to be optimizing the limited space that we have. And yes, it would be a sacrifice for staff in Lincoln. Yeah, it would. It's a sacrifice for everybody who works anywhere downtown. There you go. So I would encourage us to look at what else could we do with that space. I mean, what's this, how big is this 100 parking lot space? I mean, I'm thinking it's
we'll show you
pretty
a
big.
site plan in a minute.
If
The
you-
majority of it.
Yeah, there's keep thumbing through, and there's actually a nice chart that shows where the parking's located.
Big enough for a soccer field.
Maybe that's a good prompt. I'm just cognizant of the time. We want to make sure we get through the deck, so if you want to keep going, and then when you get to that, maybe highlight that. Does that work?
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So this is just showing the evolution of the master plan. Looking at the far left is the building design that was started in the master plan process in 2015, and then just shows the evolution that we've gone through over the last 3 years through the due diligence process, and then our current sort of master plan diagram for the building. And then looking at this specifically, this is looking at our, from the due diligence report, we had 2 options that were presented from that process. The preferred one was the vertical proposal, and through a number of continued discussions with stakeholders regarding education program, adjacencies within the building, and really the best way that we feel like the spaces could function together. The current master plan proposal is somewhat of a hybrid between that horizontal option of 5 stories and the vertical option of 9 stories, to where the current proposal is at 7 stories, where we basically were able to get program space located in the first 3 floors, based on a lot of those stakeholder conversations, to make sure that we're really having the spaces where they need to be. So this is just kind of an evolution over the last kind of 3 years of that effort.
And on that, Dan, you and I have talked about this at some length, and I think it's important for the rest of the board to just hear how the spaces and the different floors are going to be used, concentrating students in blocks on a limited number of floors. All of this going to the point that we aren't going to make kids run up and down 7 flights of stairs in, yes, exactly. Right there.
Right, the passing times. Yeah, there's been a lot of effort that's been put into the circulation in the plan. Beck and Eric are going to walk through the floor plans here pretty quickly, but what has happened over time is a lot of expressed need to be on the ground floor, close to the ground floor, has really caused the taller 9-story plan to shrink down and the shorter section to kind of shrink back up. So it's reduced the number of stories total, and it's also clustered the academic classrooms, if you will, in that tower area. So they're not typically going all the way up, all the way down, but during the day, mostly going in between 2 or 3 floors.
Okay. So a reminder of our site, and you see the new building massing that Eric just showed you on the west end of the site. So we've kind of flipped it around, I guess. We got 405 in the near ground. So this is our proposed site plan. You see the new high school on the west side of the site with the field to the east side of the site. The parking, we just talked about parking. You can see that below the grandstand. The grandstand is centered on the field. The field, the track and the field. The field includes football and soccer overlaid with one another, with some of the field areas outside of that as well. You can see a little bit of parking below what is labeled as an outbuilding. That outbuilding is the concessions, the restrooms, the batting facility, or the hitting facility, excuse me, that are provided on the site. So whereas we don't have softball or baseball fields on the site, we do finally have a hitting facility so that those students do have somewhere to practice without having to go all the way to Gabriel Park every day. And you can see also on the site remember our no-build zones, those streets, 16th and 17th Avenues. So we have no buildings on those. 17th is the avenue that bounds our school, and it has a plaza. In the middle of it, we actually have an entry plaza at the north where it says entry. That's our main way into the school. The buses will be dropping off on Salmon Street. Parents will be dropping off buses, and Max will be delivering students. Some of them might even walk or ride their bikes to school. We have our bike shelter up there as well. I guess it's actually not quite showing, but our bike shelter is where Eric is pointing right there. Anything else? Oh, we also have our practice field. You can see that on the far east side of the site. We have a small practice field. It's not full size. It's just one goal. It's a pretty much regulation width.
It's about a third size of a soccer field.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah, so
I think
animated
getting back to the parking, if you see that we have the majority of our parking is actually underneath the grandstands, and was part of our just trying to best utilize the use of space on site, so that if we were to delete that surface parking, we're not gaining much ground. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the tennis courts remain very challenging if that was the desired add back. I think it's still really, really difficult. I learned in this process that tennis courts have to face north, have to be oriented north-south. I didn't know that. But,
why is that?
For competitive play.
Sunlight.
Who knew?
Seems like that could be a home court advantage.
We also have the heritage tree that you see up at the northwest corner of the site by I-405. That's a beautiful old walnut tree that will be retained. There are a couple of other trees that are immediately south of that. We're going to work really hard to retain those as well. But because that is the one heritage tree on the site, we're required to retain that tree. And I think that's a great asset to the city as well as to this site. It's a beautiful tree. The building itself is to the west, as we have mentioned. You'll see that hole in the middle of it. That's a courtyard. We'll see that in just a second as we transition to the plan. And on the very south side, you can see an entry and a loading area. This is our loading dock for the school. One of the aspects of having a very urban site is you have to be very careful about how you bring loading vehicles, deliveries onto the site without compromising safety in any way. And this is absolutely the best way to do it. We cannot bring vehicles in where there are max tracks. that is prohibited, and we don't want to interfere with any of the buses, bus lines, drop-offs, and so on that are happening on Salmon. So we need to come in from the south. This is the place where we are accessing the site with loading. Okay, we're going to transition to the floor plans, which, as Eric mentioned.
I
is-
apologize
yeah.
if you said this. The outbuilding, is that the maintenance?
It's
the-
concessions and
Oh, okay.
restrooms and the batting or the hitting facility.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. And then on the loading zone.
Yes.
Again, it's my recollection that an earlier iteration had the egress from the loading zone going across the south end of the building straight onto 18th, which struck me as being a very elegant solution at the time.
Yes.
It looks like you're not able to do that anymore.
Right. And one is we're not allowed to access that street, but also we have
Oh.
so many program components vying to occupy the first floor of this building that that's really precious space, and we want to use it for
Yes.
music rooms and things like that.
Then Dan, are we sure that we can get trucks both
Yes.
in and out?
Yes,
to our-
yes. We have
okay.
an excellent team of consultants, and we've already studied that. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the seating in the grandstand?
It is the standard capacity, which I think is 1,500. It's the same
It's-
size as the other grandstands being provided to the other schools.
It has flexed a little bit depending on where the track is, because it's been moving a little bit. I mean, we're at such an early concept level that we don't have really the sort of that level of detail.
Yeah.
But it's
But
gonna be within the
it's,
range of-
I'd say between 1,200 and 1,500.
It's
something like
significantly
that.
smaller than the existing
Than the
grandstand
existing
on the
grandstand,
site.
right.
Yeah.
So just comparing this layout with the current layout,
Yeah.
it seems like the current layout has a lot of, well, there's the plaza open space here. That space is effectively right on 14th. And I don't know that kids hang out there. And maybe Peyton can say something about that. Is that used by kids to, at lunchtime to, I don't think it is, but, you understand what I'm talking about?
We have the two portables there now.
Oh,
for smaller
yeah.
space.
Yeah.
But there was a cleanup effort in the spring and late May, June. Children are there eating gas.
Okay. But in any case, you wouldn't want kids hanging out there within a couple of 100 feet of the freeway.
Right, this is a
Given
significant
the-
improvement
Yeah.
over that. A decent and safe outdoor space for the kids. Okay, so moving to the next, our first introduction. So this is the first floor plan of the building, and not everything that would like to be on this floor is on this floor. So the building is organized basically with what we call the wide span spaces to the south. So we have some large rooms. Our theater that you can see here is one of those. You don't want to put anything on top of a space that is very big like this with a wide span, because that's extraordinarily expensive. So we need to plan our building carefully. The other wide span space is the gym, or are the gymnasiums, and there is not room on the first floor for the gyms. They'd love to be on the first floor. They don't fit, so we've moved them up a floor, and you'll see that in the next slide. What else we do have on this floor is food service. So we have our ESPEC cafeteria and servery and common space. You'll see that to the south. We have the locker rooms, which serve the gyms above, but also the fields to the west, to the east. And we have some of our performing arts spaces on this floor as well. We also have, along 18th Avenue, the Teen Parent Center, that's what TPC is, and the Health Center here. We're not showing the clothing closet and food pantry, but we also have the EdSpec requirement for the food, for those components. And in this diagram, those are included in the gray zone to the south, but we're hoping to be able to move those a little further north in a more public part of the building. We have admin, as you'll see, up at the entrance. We need to secure that entrance and make sure that it's safe for people to come and go into the school. And then some instructional spaces on the corner. You'll remember that because we're in the city, downtown area, Central City, we need active ground floor uses. And so we'll probably have our robotics space and some of our sort of really engaging classrooms at the perimeter here. The majority of the classrooms, conventional sized classrooms, are stacked on the north side of the site because it's efficient and cost effective to do that. And so we have elevators and stairs that will be serving those 7 floors to the north. And I'm just going to go up a floor now, and we'll look at the south side and see what's happening there. Before I do that, I should note that we hope to have this courtyard that penetrates the entire building and brings natural light into the center of the building. It's healthy, it's a good way to bring light and daylight and therefore energy efficiency into the heart of the building. So the next slide is going to go to the second floor. And here we'll see on the theater is a 2-story space. It's a tall space. It has nothing on top of it. It's actually almost a 3-story space. To the south of that, we have our gym, which is a double gym. Those of you who have been to Franklin will have seen I've got the right floor. Franklin has the big gym and then the auxiliary gym, kind of a floor up. We're using a similar model. So this is the big gym. With the theatre, and then north of it, the instructional spaces. You'll see at the very north we have counselling and SPED. So special education is, we wish it could fit on the first floor, but it doesn't. Director Anthony, you'll notice that there really is, it's going to be extraordinarily challenging to fit a wood shop or a metal shop on that first floor. We just wish we could. We also don't have a wrestling room on that first floor. The wrestling room is on the floor above this. It's on the 3rd floor. But we do have the high needs part of special education next to counseling, next to the nurse, and so on, and next to the elevator, which is next to the front door. It's right next to it, and next to the front door, so that those students can come in the same entrance as everybody else. That there's a dignified way for them to get to where they're going, and they have the support that they need when they get there. These are for the high-intensity uses. The regular special education classrooms are distributed and integrated with the rest of the classrooms in the building on the upper floors, and you won't see those color-coded any different. They're yellow, along with the rest of the instructional space.
And just to clarify, there's kind of a dark gray box that you'll see on each floor. It's called core. That's what we call our building core, where we will have elevators and mechanical rooms and things like that. So that's where our elevator is located.
Yeah, and we have multiple elevators. We have 4 elevators, 2 at each end in this north part of the building.
Is the assumption is that students are going to be moving between floors primarily by stairs?
We hope, yes. This is a healthy building, and most of them will not be traveling 7 floors every passing time between classes. We've organized that north component of the building to have the science classrooms and the art classrooms on the upper 2 floors because they have high air needs and need access. We need to get that air moved up to the roof soon. But the floors from the 3rd floor to the 5th floor, where the majority of the classrooms are, and that's very easy for students to transition between those floors using the stairs.
We've talked to students about it, and overwhelmingly they said that they'd prefer to use the stairs. They just said, why would we wait for an elevator? Let's just run down the stairs to our classroom. So
it's also important that we make these stairs attractive and safe and welcoming, and to encourage the students to use them. Yeah. So keep an eye on our athletics. We're going to go up another floor.
Just before you do, a quick
Absolutely,
question.
right.
Why is there nothing on top of the performing arts space? The X there to the lower left?
Because they are tall spaces. The
again,
the choir and the band and the black box all prefer tall spaces.
Oh, that's thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so any more questions before I leave this slide? Okay, so the 3rd floor. This is, so it's pink, and you'll see that the auxiliary gym, so that 3rd gym, just as we have at Franklin, is what you see on the field side, so on the east side of the site. And you can see a running track. So we have a running track around our gym, but it's not just a running track. The capacity of the auxiliary gym itself, but also the main gym, require 4 exits. There are so many people at an event in those rooms that we need to have 4 exits out of them, and our gyms are not on the ground floor, so you can't just spill people out. We have to have access to stairs, and so you have to have a certain amount of distance between each of those exits as well. So we need the top part of that running track and the bottom part of that running track, and the extra piece that makes it a running track is the piece on the west that connects those 2 pieces. So it seems that for a site that has so few athletic facilities outside, to be able to do this provide a running track inside that's also providing safe egress from the building makes a lot of sense. We can't bring stairs down at the edges because they get in the way of our loading area. For example, it's just extremely or they're in the gym, they get in the way of the gym, so everything has to happen outside of the volume of the gym. It's one of those jigsaw puzzles that we have with our constrained site. To the north, as you'll see, there's nothing over those performing arts spaces now on 18th. That's the roof. To the north, we see the continuation of the yellow spaces, the instructional spaces. These are the classrooms as we move up through the 7 floors to the north. But you'll see green denoting media. So this is our library or our media space for the building that is forming this bridge between the sort of that classroom component to the north and the athletics component to the south. Thank you. And now we just transition through the other plans that show the upper floors, which are entirely classrooms. And as I mentioned before, these transition to science and art classrooms at the top. And are very flexible. And our teacher spaces are, the teacher support spaces are integrated on each of these floors, so there are always teachers, eyes on the street in our vertical component, and flex spaces for the students. That's a part of the minimum required education specification for students to work on projects and so on. So finally, 2 sections cut through the building, and you can see that courtyard occurring, and you see the relative heights of the instructional core of the building on the top section to the left, and you see the athletics or that big gym, double gym space stacked over the top of food service. It's got the really long structure. We can't put anything on top of it. And the same with the theatre. You never want to put anything on top of the theatre. We did manage, for now, happily, to get our theatre on the ground floor, but something had to give, and in this situation, it was the gyms have moved up. And finally, at the bottom, you just see a section taken in the opposite direction, just giving you a sense of the scale of the building.
So the next slide, we'd be moving into the cost information. So I just want to, so this kind of concludes talking about the concept design. If there were any questions about that, we would then move on to cost information. Just, yeah.
He's asking where the culinary program is. It's currently planned to be on the 3rd floor next to the gymnasium.
Which is the auxiliary gym that's on the 3rd floor.
Excuse me, the auxiliary gym.
Yep. Okay, so so now we're getting into the construction hard cost estimate figures, and just to note that this does not include our soft costs, which are the additional costs for the project that include the professional services, the owner costs such as permit fees, furniture, equipment, and things like that. Right now, we're just really focused on the cost of the construction. So this slide, we've got the cost for that recommended minimum program, which we reviewed earlier in the presentation, which is that base minimum requirement of the ed spec, which has been adjusted to align with the Lincoln program. The estimated cost for that is $184.9 million of the hard costs. And then we have these potential add alternates, which just are some additional items that have either been requested or perhaps could be required based on tech standards. So the first one, our facilities asset management group has requested an elevator stop at the roof. So the additional cost of bringing the elevator to the roof is at $131,000, and that would be to provide better access for maintenance equipment to get to the roof. At this point, a 7-story building, we don't have the ability to bring a lift to the side of the building and lift things up, which we normally do at our other facilities. Our engineering team has recommended using the Tanner Creek water source that's below the site as a heat exchange. This would be where we would be exchanging some of the heat out of the water to actually heat the building. And so this is a first cost of $313,000, but results in a fairly quick payback and long-term operational savings and energy savings. But again, this is sort of an ad alternate that we've been considering.
Do you know what the payback period?
We don't. This is really in the concept phase, but the engineering team is looking at life cycle costs for various options like this, so that we could have that information. We just don't have it now.
I mean,
yes.
If it's relatively short, that might make sense to throw a little extra cash at it and for long-term benefit.
Yeah, they're very
Plus, it would be very cool.
They're
Agreed.
hopeful it will be
Yes.
a
Well,
very
it's-
quick payback.
It's an opportunity as far as just from a sustainability standpoint that we usually don't have access to a resource like that. So
It's not a lot of money.
the other ad alternate would be to expand the theater to provide a full fly tower. This is based on revised tech standards at the district, based on what has been constructed at our other high schools. The current design does not have a full fly tower. What that is just, it's a taller space where you're able to pull full scenery up above, say during a musical. But it's an added cost that we don't currently have in the plan. And then the additional program needs that we spoke to previously regarding music practice rooms, the art classroom, additional CTE shop, and the full-size wrestling, that's captured here in those ad alternate costs. So that the hard cost range that we're talking about for the project would be the $184.9 million for the base minimum program, and then if we added these alternates, we would get up to 191.9.
So I have no idea what a fly tower, I mean, I heard the explanation, but is that something that could be added later?
No,
Or
it's
is-
something that would have to be provided at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
But nobody else has it, right?
No, they do.
Yes, the completed high schools do have fly towers.
Okay.
Okay, so this is I'm just talking about what is included in this cost basis. So we've talked about the program, the 289,261 square feet. That is the gross square footage of the entire proposed program. So it was that net usable square feet and then that grossing factor, which included all the support. And then just talking about as far as the material finishes, the proposal just is meeting the PPS design standards and technical standards, and nothing beyond that. It includes within our sustainability goals achieving LEED Gold per our PPS standards for a new building, as well as meeting the state requirements for using 1.5% of our construction costs towards green energy technology, which usually results in a solar photovoltaic array. And then the cost basis also includes some of the items that Becca had mentioned before that relate to the Central City Plan requirements that have been developed over the last year and finalized by the city, which are those additional costs, which are approximately $4.4 million. And then the geotechnical requirements, which Becca also talked about, the undocumented fill soils that have been placed over the old creek bed. We've had just additional geotechnical investigations into the site, which have just uncovered deeper fill than we had thought. We were looking at around 70 feet, but it's around 90 to 95 feet, which we've verified, as well as other costs underneath the field. We would have to do what's called a cement stabilization, where we'd have to add a cement mixture to the soils under the field to thwart any differential settlement. We've actually had a sinkhole at the existing Lincoln Field because of those soil conditions.
Before we move on,
Yes.
can you talk about the seismic condition? What? of the building?
Of the existing building or the proposed building?
You know, as far as the sort of resiliency?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll hand that off to the architect.
So the new building is going to be, the existing building very much does not meet current codes and would need a huge amount of investment. So the new building is going to be built to current codes and is going to, a portion of the building will be developed to be, I've forgotten the terminology, but to be a
Category 4.
a Category 4
Mhm.
occupancy. So it will be immediately usable after an event and a community resource.
Okay.
It will be designed to accept hookups, immediate hookups for water and for a generator that would be provided. So the district is committed to doing this with the schools and has allocated resources for that.
Is it going to be the gym area?
Yeah. Yes, the wide span areas, the gym, the theater, the commons.
Right, because the
Yes.
nature of the
All of
structure,
them.
we can't just isolate one part of the building because it's really all connected. So it's
Yeah.
more of that lower section.
Yes, it's that large lower
Oh,
section of the
okay.
building. Yeah.
Even better.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Have we explored any partnerships with the city or the county for some cost sharing around that? Because the county is responsible for providing habitable spaces after the big one. Have we talked to anybody about any of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know there's been discussion with the county through our security office. I'd have to follow up with exactly what there hasn't been anything that's come forward that said that there's any sort of immediate cost sharing in that. But I'll follow up with that and see where
Okay.
that is.
Okay, thanks.
No, they want the resource, but there's not been discussion around skin in the game.
Yeah, well,
Right.
it never is, so.
And I've understood that there may be some federal grant money out there that the district could pursue at a district level for something like that. Okay, so we're kind of getting into the meat and potatoes here about our costs. And this just gives us kind of an overview of our cost estimate from where we were last January 2017 from our due diligence estimate. And so that this is just kind of captured up at the top and then with some detail below. So we see that in January 2017, the due diligence estimate was $128.8 million. This was an estimate that was procured by the district's own, a private estimator that the district hired for all the bond projects. The direction that was given that estimator was to price the projects just in the current dollars at the time, and so that means no escalation was included. And also
Who gave those
assuming-
instructions? Or like,
What's that?
Was that the instructions for all the
Correct.
projects?
All the due diligence cost estimates.
And so who at the district would have asked for that?
The COO at the time directed that, but just to be clear, this is just at the hard cost. So there was cost escalation included, but not in the hard cost estimator's number. It was carried separately.
So then we moved on as we brought the project team back on board after the bond was approved, and we've developed our program concept for the building and refining the master plan. Our estimate came back this last March at $167.9 million, which, as you see, is a $39.1 million increase from January of the year previous. And then as we have worked to sort of reconcile that estimate, in addition to some direction from the district, which we'll get down to below regarding some of our risk, the current cost estimate then is at $184.9 million. So if we then keep going down this chart here, then you'll see, okay, where do we get from the 128 to 167? So that's from January of last year to March of this year. What we've done is we've, in the item A, increased markups. That is the escalation that we've then applied to the hard costs. So as Dan said, that was budgeted elsewhere, but it's a hard cost item, so we've brought that into our hard cost estimate. And it also includes an additional year that was added to the schedule because as the board had approved the sequencing of projects, there was an additional year for the Lincoln project to be completed. The grading and geotechnical considerations, item B, that's some of what we talked about, the geotechnical conditions, the soil conditions, so that's the added cost for the pilings and the cement treatment of the soils. Then this item C, net to gross adjustment. This is something where right now we're looking at almost a $4.5 million cost, which is something that Becca had described about the sort of additional sort of core and sort of building function space that we need because of our multiple floors. And this is something that we are going to work hard to try to reduce. But at the same time, as we talked about, we are required to have a certain number of stairs and elevators and restrooms on every floor as opposed to distributing them further in the building, so that the building just got a little bit larger in that respect. Item D is just increase steel costs based on recent market activity. Item E, increased cost of the hitting facility for baseball and softball. So existing hitting facility is a sort of an open, it's really not even a facility. It's just kind of a netting and things like that. And so that's, we had in our proposal to do something like that. But once we were getting into it and talking to the athletic directors, that they really want an actual kind of building to have that
Are we talking
occur
about a batting
into.
cage?
Batting cages, yes.
Okay.
The other thing that does, though, is that it gives us much more flexibility so that we can use that space for other athletic uses on off-season from baseball and softball. Item F, increased site costs to meet code changes. So as we've gotten more into our work and having, we've been having meetings with city staff, planning and code review staff regarding their requirements, and they've come back with some additional requirements that we didn't initially know about and anticipate. One in particular is our stormwater treatment. Traditionally, you were allowed to release a certain amount of stormwater into the city drainage systems, but they are limiting us on doing that because they're worried about future development downstream with their limited capacity. So we have to store and treat more stormwater on site. So that's an added cost. And then just as our building the design has been more refined, that item G, additional cost for fire sprinklers, that's just additional cost because we have a better idea of what the building is like. The initial cost was really kind of more based on a general box, but now we know we have some outdoor areas that need some specific type of sprinklers. Item H, that's another sort of thing another surprise for us. PG has come back and said that they're going to require us to have multiple electric service connections to the utility because of those no-build zones that we talked about that are in the 16th and 17th Avenue vacated right-of-ways. PG does not want to run their electric service or have us run their electric service through those areas. So they're requiring us to have multiple connections to the utility. So that's an added cost. So that got us from the 128 to the 167. And then now if we look below, there are a few more items that get us from 167.9 to the 184.9. The item M, that's the cement treatment of soils. That's related to the geotechnical stuff that we talked about. I know I mentioned it up above. The cost up above was really related to the piling depths that we originally had at 70 feet, and now they're 95 or deeper. So the additional cost of the cement treatment of the soils is $1.3 million. And then this item N, changes to construction markups. related to risk alignment. I would just like Dan to speak to that a little bit.
Sure.
And there's some backup material that we have.
So that was a discussion we had when we were going through this cost estimate. It was the same time we were going through the updated Madison cost estimate from two separate professional cost estimators. And they both took different approaches to some of the markups, really the risk assessment of how we're going to manage risk. And that's different contingencies that are built into the cost estimate that include like a design contingency, which is therefore in the early stages of design, the estimator is going to estimate what they can see. But the design is not fully formed. Therefore, they know that there's going to be additional components added to that will cost that they just don't know now or can see now. So you add on what is called a design contingency. And there's also this, like the CMGC contingency. These are CMGC projects. We will execute a GMP with that contractor. They will have a component of risk in there of how much they think they will need to cover their costs to complete the project. So the two cost estimators had different percentages, and we sat down and had a discussion about what we thought was most prudent considering what we know and with our existing projects and what the current market is. And we decided to go the more conservative route and go over those higher percentages. So it's a 10% design contingency, which is pretty standard and what we see quite a bit at this time. A 5% CMGC contingency, which is what we see pretty regularly and what we've experienced on our other projects. And there's also a market volatility component, which is kind of an interesting piece that we're seeing now in cost estimates, where cost estimators are saying, yeah, okay, I can calculate escalation maybe, but because the market is so volatile or hot, if you will, it's hard to know exactly how those bids are going to come in, so they add an additional component of what they call market volatility. If those things don't come to fruition, then those are obviously costs not spent, but that's what those are, and it's really just how are we managing our risk at this early stage of design.
Well, and we saw some of that market volatility with the tariffs on steel that added 1.7 million to our costs, and that was certainly something that we did not and could not anticipate. And then the item O, that last item, that is the resiliency, the seismic resiliency that we talked about. That is the added costs to upgrade our structural systems and some of our utility systems to meet those requirements. So it's one of the benefits of building a new building. It's not a big added cost to have that additional resiliency because we're more or less just making the new structure stronger. So.
But that wasn't in the original plan?
No, that was not in the, back at due diligence, that was, it was an alternate, and it was something that we were given direction that when we picked up design after the bond was passed to look at the actual cost of what that would be. So it was not included. And then I just wanted to note, it was item F on the materials that were in your packet. There was an error. We were missing a 0. So that pretty significant. It was 1.7 million and not 174,000. So the bottom line numbers are all correct. It was just that one line item had an error.
I thought you were going to say it was only 17,000.
I wish.
So Eric, to just state what I think is obvious from what you've said, you're calculating for $42.5 million in escalation in two different pots. Your 27.5 and your 15.1.
No, sorry to clarify. The
Oh,
27.5 is the escalation. The 15.1 are additional markups. So a CMGC contingency, for example. There's always going to be a CMGC contingency that's a part of your GMP that you negotiate. We have one on grant right now, for example.
There's backup to that number in your
thank
packet.
you.
It's the last page of that executive summary.
So the markup is more, we're not doing this in 2017, we're doing this a couple of years out. Is that correct? So
Not
it's-
necessarily. So, for example, the CMGC contingency is always going to be in there, and it's typically estimated as a percentage. So in this case, we're using 5% because that's what we've seen with our historical data. We think that is an accurate, legitimate number to estimate at this point in time, based upon our current projects. Design contingency, all projects have design contingency, and as the design progresses, it goes lower and lower over time.
So I was referring back to the A.
Item A.
Oh, my apologies.
And is that more this isn't 2017, this is later? Is that
Correct. That is the
Right.
cost escalation over time.
okay?
But just to be clear, that total amount, that 27.5, that, some of that was included in the
As a-
original
as a
budget, just not
contingency.
here, just not in the hard cost. Well, you'll see a number for total project cost later. It was the way it was carried. So it's really just moving from point A to point B. So one way to think about this is we could do this and, for the sake of this discussion, take out item A altogether. And then
Just
we'd
add
add
it on
it,
to
then we'd add it to the
contingency.
soft costs, because this is just construction costs. And so there's an estimate for the escalation here. And so it's typically where you see it. Previous direction was to not have it here, to carry it elsewhere in the soft costs.
Okay, so we've also been asked to come with cost reduction options to consider. And as we've, described the area program of the building, that we're meeting the base minimum requirement of the ed spec and the capacity design. So for us to be able to cut costs, these are options that could be considered. The first one there would be to reduce program, which the impact would be to reduce capacity or eliminate academic program. We could reduce the technical standards, which would mean to not meet the PPS design standards and technical requirements for finishes and materials and equipment, so that we could have that'd be an early first cost savings, but then we'd have higher maintenance and operational costs in the long term. We could delete the LEED requirements, to not pursue the LEED Gold rating for the building, which would be a potential savings of just under 1%. But then again, the LEED project allows us to have lower operational costs, so the impact would be higher operational costs. It's possible that the district could negotiate with the state an exemption from the 1.5% construction cost requirement for green energy technology. Other districts have done that, but that would be a district-wide decision, not just for this project specifically, but we could save about $2.5 million. But then we wouldn't have that sustainability factor as far as having the solar power to help offset our operating costs. Another option would be to go to natural grass field instead of turf. So we'd have some savings there, but then we'd have some maintenance costs, limits on the usage, and then also questions of parity to the other track and fields in the district. We could delete the hitting facility, but then that would push all of baseball and softball activities off-site. We could delete the the small practice field, which could save roughly $1 million, but again, that would force more athletics off-site. And then we could also decline all the add alternates and additional program items that we had described previously for approximately $6 to $7 million.
So question, just somewhat out of curiosity, if we said, here's another $4 to $5 million, add in all that stuff, where would you put it? Where are you gonna put a 3,000 square foot wood shop and a visual arts classroom and back to the drawing board, but,
It's challenging. I think the most likely location for the shop would be next to that outbuilding. So it would be a bigger outbuilding. That actually makes a lot of sense for a facility like that. It can be more affordable construction. It can have its own local mechanical system for heating and cooling and dust control.
Okay, so it would be a little bit of a return to, I think, one of the first options you had, which was
Right.
had a
Had
second
an extra building. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it was decided after reviewing that, I believe, I wasn't part of that process, that security is an issue, and so the preferred option was to consolidate the building as a single building. But I think, as you've seen, there is no space without moving something up from that first floor, and so I think adding that to the outside is probably the most likely option.
And it's possible we could reduce some of that parking to accommodate that,
Yeah.
that program space. I'd say adding a classroom, say the arts classroom, I mean, that's.
We can probably
that's
find ways to shoehorn
probably,
the classroom in, possibly a larger wrestling room. It's all challenging, but that big shop space is the real big challenge.
But we like a challenge.
Yeah, we rise to challenges.
Many iterations of challenges.
So looks like we're at the last slide. So I'd like to, unless you have some concluding comments, what I'd like to do is we have a large block of time also at next week's board meeting. And so if do you have something you'd like to say in conclusion that sort of sums all this up? You don't have to, but what we likely will do is come away and survey the board, what additional questions people have, have an opportunity to review the materials, and then come back with a plan of action.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, process-wise, we're looking for some feedback from the board and to be able to incorporate any changes that are necessary or providing additional information that's necessary, and then come back with a master plan for consideration for approval.
Okay, great.
Dr. Anthony?
I do have one quick question here at the end. Going to the spreadsheet you provided us, I am just a little confused, and I'm already getting questions about this. Column A starts with an original budget, cost of construction, $151 million. That's a different figure than the others that were in the PowerPoint. So where'd that number come from?
So I'll go ahead and take that one. A couple weeks ago, the intention was just to provide, or we were headed forward just providing the PowerPoint, not the other documents. I was actually out last week. There was some confusion, so I did not set up staff very well to get those final documents up provided to the board. So that's the incorrect document. The total number is about right, but as far as the breakout in there, that's not the appropriate document. So I apologize.
Okay, so just X out everything above $187 million.
We'll bring clarifying information and
Thank you, that would be very good.
corresponding and information next time,
I guess my last thing is, I'm still suffering from sticker shock here, and I still don't understand where the discrepancy happened and how and why. And I don't even know if you guys can answer that, but it's a big discrepancy. And I would like to understand.
Well, I will say it's probably a larger conversation overall, but when we come back with additional information for the master plan, we're going to also provide additional cost information. So when we talk about these really big numbers, it's definitely a challenge to answer why is that number what it is. So we want to give more detailed backup so someone can point at a specific line and say, okay, that number, and then that number. It makes it a lot easier to have a conversation and understand. As far as the change of pricing over time, I think that's a whole other larger discussion too.
And I'm sorry, I said the last was last, but I lied. Going back to that spreadsheet, Dan, and going off of Director Moore's comment, it would be very good to know that if all of these increases are necessary, that the hemorrhaging on our poor bond is going to stop with these. And going back to the spreadsheet, there are a lot of entries on that spreadsheet that are marked as 0 that I do not believe are going to be 0. For instance, I do not believe that someone is going to knock down the old Lincoln building for nothing. I have a sneaking suspicion that they are going to charge us something for that. So when we get the number, we'd really like it to be a number we can finally rely on.
Absolutely, and we will certainly provide additional cost information, and what we want to show is all the assumptions and all the data that goes into that number, because certainly, we can't predict the future right now. Early on in the projects, the budget risk is higher and reduces over time. So what we can do is show exactly the assumptions that we put in there, how we believe we are accurately managing that risk, and be very transparent about that.
And to clarify, the cost of demolition and deconstruction was rolled into the new construction costs. So it is actually, it's in there, but it's just not clarified. So we will clarify that.
Great. So as we have the Lincoln Master Plan and budget to still approve, but we also have a larger conversation as a board that has been compounding over the Kellogg, Madison, other approvals. This doesn't have anything to do with you. You're just one piece of the larger equation that we've got to work through, and we'll need to do that, I think, with some clarity and have some sort of time frame and framework so that the Benson community has an expectation of they'll know what to expect, sort of the path forward. I mean, we know we're going to be very financially constrained, but we probably need to answer that question at least with some substance in the next month. So thank you very much. And again, our next board meeting is July 24th, and we have, I think this is also the largest component of the meeting, although it's a pretty substantive meeting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, per board policy, leadership roles are voted on twice annually at this time. But first, I want to make sure that everybody knows that we have a set of revised resolutions. We have resolution number 5684 and resolution 5687. Previously, they were one co-joined resolution, and now they're two separate ones. And Ms. Houston, which resolution did we get rid of?
5684 is now the chair.
Okay, so it's great. Okay, so at this time, we'll now consider resolution 5684, election of board chairperson. And I'd like to ask Director Bailey for a nomination, please.
Yes, I would nominate Director Moore.
I'll second that.
Great. It's been moved by Director Bailey and seconded by Director Constam. Is there any board discussion? If not, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries 7-0. Congratulations, Director Moore. Now Chair Moore. Well, I'm going to finish out the meeting. We already talked about it. Congratulations. We look forward to your leadership. And at this time, I'd like to ask for any nominations for the vice chair. This will be resolution 5687. Director Anthony.
I'd like to nominate Director Esparza Brown for vice chair.
Thank you, Director Anthony. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Director Bailey. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries by a 7-0 vote. Congratulations, Director Esparza Brown. Director Moore, do you have anything, comments you'd like to make, or Director Esparza Brown?
Do you want to say anything? Yes, tonight.
Thank you. I am just excited. I think, as I said earlier, we're at a point where it feels like so many things are happening, and we're really putting together solid teams. So I think it's a great time to continue our work. We were left with having accomplished a lot. So I think we have this precedence of we're going to keep moving ahead and working really hard to continue the pace, to make the changes and to get to where we want to be as a district. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to this coming year.
Pretty much ditto. So I want to thank everybody for this honor, and I will do my best to live up to your statement of confidence, and I'm looking forward to working together. We have a lot on our plate. I first want to take a moment to recognize Julia. People said some things in the beginning, and but I also want to add my thanks. I think Julia has done an extraordinary job this last year. It was a time of enormous transition, lots of things happening at the same time. And in the midst of all of it, Julia helped this board and the new district leadership to tackle a really significant body of work. I mean, at the beginning, we looked at, a list of things, and that only captures the really high-level stuff. That doesn't even capture all of it. And Julia is sort of the energizer bunny of PPS, and inexhaustible energy, and she really has kind of pushed us all, I think, to do more work than we thought we were capable of. And a lot of what we have done over the last year has increased the district's transparency. It has improved our ability to uncover and respond to problems. We've started to streamline operations, and we are about to, I think, dramatically expand the supports and the opportunities that are available to students. And I want to make one special call out. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that without Julia's skills and persistence and endless confidence in the face of daunting odds, we would not have recruited a superintendent last summer. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I thought that trying to do an off-cycle recruitment of a superintendent was doomed. I think the word I used was delusional.
I've been accused of that.
And she proved me wrong. And I would say not only did we get a superintendent, we got Superintendent Guerrero, who is, in my opinion, exactly the right person for this district at this moment. And I think Julia deserves an enormous amount of credit for that. And I think that the fact that we did pull that off against all odds it shows that when we come together and align around common goals and shared values, we can work minor miracles. And I think we're going to have to remember that as we go forward, because we're looking at another daunting stretch of some pretty significant changes. And I would say, looking back over the last year, it's been at times tumultuous, especially for some school communities. And I think we all recognize that we could have done some things better. And I'm confident that we've learned some lessons and we will do better. But I guess I also feel compelled to say that I think we all have to recognize that we're talking about transforming a district. And that is going to be a tall order. It is not going to be easy. Change is hard. But it's necessary because maintaining the status quo is unacceptable. We're leaving too many kids behind, and we've done it for too long. So we need to do better, and we are doing better. I think we've already seen some big changes in the last year. We've got essentially an entirely new executive team. We've got, not only do we have new people in old positions, we have positions we've never had before. And most of them are critically important to fulfill our core mission of educating kids. So changes are happening, and for the most part, they're positive. And I think what's been happening over the last year, though, I think has been, the really positive changes have been mostly invisible to most people. We're talking about building organizational infrastructure, which is about the least sexy thing I can think of, but it's absolutely critical. And we're building internal capacity to do really good work that PPS has not had for a generation. When the big budget cuts came, central office was slashed, and since then we have been missing critical pieces of organizational structure that are necessary to support all the good work that's happening in classrooms all over this district. Amazing things are happening, and it's been happening pretty much on the backs of all of our employees. A lot of them have been kind of left to figure things out. They haven't gotten the support from central office that they need and they deserve. So it's time that we give them that, and I think we're going to. So I am really looking forward to continuing the momentum that we built up this year. We've got a pretty ambitious agenda for next year. And I'm looking forward to all of us working together on the board, together with district leadership and staff and teachers and parents and school communities and the business community and the larger community and everybody else we can think of, to really make this a district that all of our students deserve, so that students can not only flourish and blossom while they're in our care, but can thrive into adulthood. So I don't think we're going to accomplish it all next year, but we're going to make some progress, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be an exciting year. So thank you again for the vote of confidence.
Well said.
Appreciate it.
So win as a team, onward. Congratulations to both of you. Now onto something really mundane, the business agenda, sorry.
I'm sorry, you're right.
You're next. Okay, the board will now consider the remainder of the business agenda, having already voted on Resolution 5682 through 5684. Ms. Houston, are there any additional changes to the business agenda? Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the business agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Esparza Brown and seconded by Director Anthony. Ms. Houston, is there any public comment?
There is not.
Is there any board discussion?
I had noted before that I wanted to poll and discuss the legal services contract, but I don't feel that's necessary.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The business agenda is approved by a 7-0 vote. Next, we have, last board meeting, we had a complaint that was a level 3 that came to the board, and we upheld the superintendent's decision in that case, and we decided as a board that going forward we were going to have at least a brief summary of what the complaint was, and any relevant district-wide issues. So although we've already voted on the complaint, I'd like to ask Director Bailey for some comments.
So I don't know that we decided that. So basically what happened, we heard 2 complaints at our last meeting. One we discussed pretty thoroughly, and the other, there was 0 discussion. We just voted and no explanation of our vote or the issues involved. And I got a text from the complainant who said, "What the heck, that's really disrespectful," and I agreed with him. And I apologized to him, and I'm apologizing publicly now. I think we did that person wrong. We do anybody wrong who brings a complaint to us that we don't demonstrate that we treat it thoughtfully and respectfully. So what we've talked earlier about, we're rebuilding systems here and protocols, and I'm going to propose that our protocol as a board be that anytime a complaint comes to us, that one of us volunteers to go through the issues, and that when we vote, we have an explanation for how we're voting on it. So as kind of a makeup to going forward, I've volunteered to kind of go through the complaint. Because one of the things is when there is a complaint, whether we uphold it or not, there's usually more than a few nuggets of truth in there. So I'm going to go through, and again, when we're discussing a complaint, we also need to be cognizant that there may be some confidential issues involved, and so we're not going to go there. But there are some other issues I'd like to review in this complaint that I think are echo a lot of my experience as a parent advocate going back a long time.
Scott, I just want to interject before you get into the details of this particular complaint. Appreciate what you said, and that when we look back at our complaint policy, I mean, one of the things that we declared was really important was being able to use our complaint process to identify systemic problems, not just resolve individual concerns. And so what you're identifying here really helps us to do that. And there may be cases where the merits of the particular complaint, fall down on one side, but as you said, it doesn't invalidate all the other concerns that were raised. And that's sort of a gift to us when somebody brings that forward, so that we can move it and say, okay, this is how we're going to address these. So thank you.
Yeah, agreed. So a couple of things. One thing is, so there was an original complaint, there was a response from district staff, and more discussion and kind of a back and forth, and more issues emerged out of that. And according to our current policy, if related issues crop up, apparently that's a new complaint. And so it doesn't have to be addressed. And that just seems cumbersome to me. And it seems like if there's, somebody starts the ball rolling and there's more discussion and more related issues come out, that we should treat it as one going forward. It might be extending the period we have to deal with it. But it's like, okay, so now do we have to start a whole new process? And part of the response was, wow, you're bringing up a new issue. We don't have to respond to it because it's a new thing, not part of the current complaint. And that, I think we need to look at that as a meta issue.
So, excuse me. So, Scott, are we talking about a specific complaint now, or are we talking about governance around complaints?
So I'm transitioning into talking about this specific complaint.
Okay.
So in this specific complaint, and it may happen with others as well, I don't know, but could very well be that there was a complaint, there was a response from staff, and that the complainant kind of dug deeper around these issues, and but wait, there was also this. And because that was could be treated as a new item, it's like gee, do we have to start this process all over again? Doesn't make sense to me, and if I were on the outside driving the complaint, I'd feel like this is really bureaucratic. So I just want to throw that out there as something for us to think about in the process.
We likely, I don't know if you want to just talk or you want to like have people
Sure.
raise things,
Yeah.
but it might be because the timelines, and so we likely, if they introduced a new topic and we still are bound by the timelines, that may be why the response is you have to start over. So it may be that they would have to jointly agree to a new timeline.
Yeah. So let's find a way to deal with this in a coherent manner, not in a bureaucratic manner, is what I'm saying.
Well, my perspective, because I think I know which complaint you're talking about, is if the staff has already gone through an exhaustive process to investigate the first complaint, and then in the process where you can appeal the complaint, new issues come up, it seems like it's not bureaucratic, it's a new complaint, because you're asking the district to take on a whole set of new issues, which is what I think happened, if I'm thinking correctly, the complaint that you're talking about.
Okay.
I want to be careful, not only the timing, but I want to be careful about not having the staff continue to have to answer revolving issues as it goes through the appeal. I got an angry text from this person too, and I thought it was pretty unfair. We had a lot of material to look through, and I'm assuming that each of us who voted in favor of the superintendent looked through that extensive amount of material and decided to uphold the superintendent's decision. I guess the question I have is the purpose of this discussion to make every complaint like that a detailed public discussion in a forum in front of the board, or is the purpose for us to, as board members, analyze the information we've been given and make a decision? Because that's two very different things.
Okay.
So if I can add, because I do appreciate Director Rosen's points here, if a complaint has been looked at on sort of the merit of the issue that's been brought up, and that gets appealed and it goes to a level 2, and a designee of mine takes a second look at it, and now appealed further to a level 3 with a recommendation, but the new information emerges, is it the board's intent to reopen the issue and look at it on information staff didn't have to begin with? So if there's substantially different new information or evidence, well, then that might change sort of our perspective, because it might be information we didn't have at level 1. So it's important to sort of, I think that's the purpose of maintaining some integrity, to, based on what you shared with us, this is sort of the recommendation we could arrive at. But if you had something else to share, then it's good to have that the first time. But I think at what point does it become, not that it's an unrelated new complaint, but it's just new information we didn't have to begin with.
Well, anyway, some food for thought there. Concern number 1 brought up was the complainant organized some parents at their child's school to look at the quality of the education at the school and to, be part of a collaborative process. Apparently, the school had no site council, which is an issue I started working on back in 2001 because we didn't have any site council training. Many schools didn't have a site council or had one that was a rubber stamp, et cetera, et cetera. And here we are 17 years later, and we're basically in the same boat. So this is a missed opportunity for collaborative school-level planning to improve the education of our children. And we're there. The related issue that popped up in the back and forth was the school budgets weren't, which I believe are supposed to be approved by the site council for some reason. I don't know whether that's makes any sense at all, but that's the way the rules are. Weren't published, weren't transparent. So that was germane to the topic, but came up secondarily. So that's a big issue, and the process they went through from a sort of a parent ground up group into into kind of being co-opted into being a PASS team, which is part of a district initiative. I don't even know what a PASS team is. Maybe some of you do. I think that if I were a parent in their shoes, I'd feel screwed with. That I started something, it kind of got co-opted, and then, oh, we're going to deal with this issue on a site council that we haven't had before. Wow, what just happened here to my engagement, the engagement